Chapter 186. Back then, to prevent that vile soul from wreaking havoc, Emperor Taizu personally sealed that vile soul here and used the vitality of the county's hundreds of thousands of citizens to suppress it. If that vile soul breaks out of the seal, even I would have to avoid it. Li Mu had to pretend to be the Venerable Thousand Illusions while racking his brains to come up with a story to fool Chu Jiang of Gojoseon. There was a risk that he would be seen through at any time. After all, the reason why Chu Jiang of Gojoseon did not dare to act rashly was because he was afraid of the Venerable Thousand Illusions. Once he found out that Li Mu was just an assembled divinity impostor, he would turn on him immediately. Li Mu could not possibly defeat a peak Fifth Realm spirit. He could only stall for time as much as possible until a few Fifth Realm cultivators arrived from Yangshuo County. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's expression was uncertain. He was not doubting the words of the Venerable Thousand Illusions, but he had planned for 5 years for today. He wanted to break through to Sixth Realm and become an elder so that he would no longer be under others. He was unwilling to give up at such a crucial moment. Li Mu could see that Chu Jiang of Gojoseon was unwilling to give up. If he continued to force him, it would probably backfire. He put his hands behind his back and said calmly, "I can help you seal that vile soul for an hour, but I have a condition." Chu Jiang of Gojoseon immediately said, "Please speak, Venerable Thousand Illusions." If the Venerable Thousand Illusions helped him for no reason, Chu Jiang of Gojoseon would definitely be on high alert. The Venerable Thousand Illusions, who was known for being sinister and cunning, would definitely not be so generous. Perhaps he had already included Chu Jiang of Gojoseon in his calculations. His condition made Chu Jiang of Gojoseon feel more at ease. Li Mu looked at Chu Jiang of Gojoseon and said leisurely, "I want you to work under me after you break through." Chu Jiang of Gojoseon had a difficult look on his face as he said, "But the Lord Sage." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "As for Netherworld, this seat will naturally tell him. Do you think that Netherworld will fall out with this seat over a subordinate?" Chu Jiang of Gojoseon immediately said, "I am willing to serve you." To him, the most important thing was to ascend to the Sixth Realm. As for whether he would have to submit to others after ascending, that would depend on who he was submitting to. The Nether Hell Sage was merely an ordinary Sixth Realm cultivator. Naturally, he wasn't willing to work under him. However, the Thousand Illusions' Venerable Master would soon ascend to the Transcendence Realm. Being able to work for a Transcendence Realm cultivator was, on the contrary, an opportunity for him. Li Mu slowly walked towards the center of the county city and said, "That evil spirit is suppressed under the state temple. This seat will teach you a formation. This formation can temporarily trap this spirit for an hour. After an hour, it will break free. At that time, it will be a headache for the North County government and the Fulu school." Chu Jiang of Gojoseon clasped his fists and said, "My lord, you are wise." Li Mu's tone changed. "Although this formation is powerful, but..." Chu Jiang of Gojoseon hurriedly asked, "But what?" Li Mu said, "But it will require the soul power of your subordinates. You won't be unwilling to part with it, right?" Chu Jiang of Gojoseon said without hesitation, "I will do it now." He stretched out his palm, and a powerful suction force erupted from his palm. The nearby subordinates were torn apart by this suction force and flew towards Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's palm. Amidst a series of screams, they turned into pure soul power and were absorbed into Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's body. Li Mu looked at Chu Jiang of Gojoseon with gratification and said, "Ruthless and decisive. Not bad. I admire you." Chu Jiang of Gojoseon clasped his fists and said, "Thank you for your praise, my lord. I have also been influenced by you." Li Mu nodded and said, "Those who achieve great things must have a ruthless heart. On the path of cultivation, the weak are prey to the strong. Only the fittest survive. The big fish eat the small fish, and the small fish eat the shrimps. They can only blame themselves for being too weak. The weak have no right to choose." Chu Jiang of Gojoseon no longer had any doubts about the identity of Monk Chenhuan. He lowered his head and said, "I will remember." The two figures gradually walked away. In the Union Pavilion, Bai Tingxin's voice trembled as she asked softly, Why is there no sound outside? At the critical moment when Chu Jiang of Gojoseon arrived, Li Mu suddenly appeared and pushed them into the shop. He closed the door and faced Chu Jiang of Gojoseon alone. He was no match for Chu Jiang of Gojoseon. The girls were prepared to die together. However, after a long time, there was still no sound from outside. Lu Hanyan finally could not help but open the shop door. She found that there was no one outside. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon was gone. Li Mu was gone. Even the resentful spirits and evil spirits outside had all disappeared. There was no one on the street. Above their heads was the blood-red sky. Even the moonlight was dyed red. The entire county was shrouded in a layer of blood-red panic. In front of the royal temple, Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's tall and imposing figure was busy in the open space in front of the royal temple. He followed Li Mu's instructions and drew crisscrossing trenches on the ground as formation patterns. He filled the formation patterns with the soul power of his subordinates. Then he formed a seal with both hands. The formation patterns suddenly emitted a mysterious power. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon sensed it carefully and confirmed that it was the power of a seal. He looked at Li Mu and asked carefully, "Sir, is this enough?" "Of course not." Li Mu looked at him indifferently and said, "A seventh realm evil spirit is still powerful even if it has been suppressed under the royal temple for hundreds of years. You are too naive if you want to suppress it with a small formation. Even if it can only seal it for an hour, it needs the help of a formation group." Several formations complemented each other and nested together. Its power is no less than the 18 Hell formation. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon frowned and asked, "Will there not be enough time?" Li Mu said, "An hour is enough. After setting up the seal, you still have an hour to sacrifice these mortals." "Why is an hour not enough?" Chu Jiang of Gojoseon said, "Of course there is enough time. But after an hour, I'm afraid the strong cultivators from the North County will arrive." Li Mu looked up at the blood-red night sky and snorted. He said, "The 18 Hell formation was created by a talented elder of the demon sect hundreds of years ago. How can a few fifth realm cultivators break it? Moreover, I am here. What can they do? Continue to set up the seal according to what I said." Not only was Thousand Illusions Venerable good at refining corpses, but he was also very proficient in formations. Li Mu casually chose a complicated formation and let Chu Jiang of Gojoseon get busy first. Even if the White Demon King and Xuandu arrived, they wouldn't be able to break the 18 Hell formation in a short time. But now, Li Mu had no other choice. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon carved the formation for a while. Suddenly, he looked up at Li Mu and asked, "I wonder how much of your cultivation has recovered. If the strong cultivators from the North County arrive, should I take care of you?" Li Mu knew that things were not good. Although he used the identity of Thousand Illusions Venerable to intimidate Chu Jiang of Gojoseon for a while, as time passed, Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's mind would calm down. The flaws in his body would gradually appear. After all, Li Mu was only in the spirit realm. He could pretend to be Thousand Illusions Venerable, but he couldn't pretend to be a strong cultivator. Faced with Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's test, Li Mu's expression didn't change. Instead, he smiled mockingly and asked, "What? Are you testing me? If my cultivation hasn't reached Dongxian, are you going to use the 18 Hell formation to refine me?" Chu Jiang of Gojoseon immediately lowered his head and said, "I wouldn't dare." He didn't doubt Thousand Illusions Venerable's identity, but after he gradually calmed down, he began to doubt his strength. Thousand Illusions Venerable was very strong. In just half a year, he was able to cultivate a part of his soul to the Dongxian realm. However, that part of his soul had long been killed by the Fulu school and Xuanzong's experts from Dongxian. The one standing in front of him now was just another part of Thousand Illusions Venerable's soul after he possessed someone else's body. In the past 2 months, nothing major had happened in the northern region. It was impossible for him to cultivate this part of his soul to Dongxian in 2 months. If that was the case, wasn't this an opportunity for him? When Thousand Illusions Venerable was at his weakest, he could devour him and obtain his memory inheritance. Then, through the 18 Hell formation, he could ascend to the 6th realm. After returning to the demon sect, He could replace Thousand Illusions Venerable and become the new 10 Great Elders. After this thought emerged in his mind, he could no longer suppress it. It even made his hands tremble as he inscribed the formation. He didn't immediately make a move. A centipede dies but never falls down. Thousand Illusions Venerable strength had been deeply engraved in his heart. Even if it was just a part of his soul that had yet to recover its strength, he didn't dare to underestimate it. He finished inscribing a new formation. According to Li Mu's instructions, after pouring in his soul power, he activated the formation with a trace of his Fa Li. After forming a seal with his hands, Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's eyes flashed a few times. Suddenly, his Fa Li increased by several times. A powerful shockwave spread out from the runes. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's body stood firm. Li Mu's body was pushed back several steps by this impact. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon looked back at Li Mu and asked, "Lord Thousand Illusions, could it be that your Fa Li hasn't recovered to the middle 3 realms?" Li Mu smiled and said, "Why don't you give it a try?" Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's face was uncertain. The shadow that Thousand Illusions Venerable had left on him was too great. Seeing Li Mu so calm, he didn't dare to act rashly. He bowed and said, "I was careless just now. Lord, please don't blame me." He still planned to set up the sealing formation first. Even if he could devour this seemingly weak Thousand Illusions, he wouldn't be able to completely refine his split soul in a short period of time. If the evil spirit underground was released, his 5 years of planning would be for naught. Half an hour passed quietly. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon activated the last formation. He looked at Li Mu again and asked, "Lord, is it done now?" The experts hadn't arrived yet. Li Mu was already a little anxious. He racked his brains to piece together this formation. The ground was already covered with formation patterns. Even if he wanted to set up another formation, there was no empty space. Forcefully using a formation to delay time would only make Chu Jiang of Gojoseon suspect his true purpose. Li Mu nodded and said, "It's done." Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's face revealed a trace of joy and said, "We can finally start the sacrifice?" Li Mu hurriedly said, "Wait." Chu Jiang of Gojoseon asked, "Lord, is there anything else?" No matter what, he couldn't let Chu Jiang of Gojoseon sacrifice the people of the city. Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "Now is not the time. In the last quarter of the Yin hour, the Yin Qi in the world is the strongest. After that, it will change from extreme Yin to extreme Yang. At that time, the power of the 18 Yin prison formation will be at its strongest. 3/4 of an hour?" Chu Jiang of Gojoseon shook his head and said, "Things will change if we delay. The power of the formation is already enough. There's no need to wait until then. 3/4 of an hour? Lord Thousand Illusions." Chu Jiang of Gojoseon stared at Li Mu and said, "Since just now, you've been stalling for time. Are you waiting for someone or planning something?" Chapter 187. After being exposed by Chu Jiang of Gojoseon, although Li Mu was already a little flustered in his heart, he still had to maintain his calm on the surface. His face darkened as he asked, "You dare to doubt this king?" "Of course this king does not dare to doubt Lord Chen Huan." Chu Jiang of Gojoseon took a few steps back, keeping a distance from Li Mu, and said, "But Lord Chen Huan's actions, this king cannot help but doubt. For this opportunity, I have been planning for 5 years. 5 years 5 years Does Lord Chen Huan know how I have spent these 5 years?" Li Mu said coldly, "Impudent." A touch of madness appeared on Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's face as he gritted his teeth and said, "This king's plan. No one is allowed to destroy it. Not even Lord Chen Huan." Chu Jiang of Gojoseon did not doubt his identity as Lord Chen Huan, but he doubted his motives. He racked his brains and delayed Chu Jiang of Gojoseon for an hour, which was already the limit. The obstruction just now had caused Chu Jiang of Gojoseon to become suspicious. This was also something that could not be helped. After all, Li Mu could not watch Chu Jiang of Gojoseon sacrifice the people of the county city. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon had spent a lot of time and effort for today. Not to mention Lord Chen Huan, Even if his own father tried to stop him, he would still fight with his life. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon looked at Li Mu and suddenly grinned, asking, Lord Qianhuan's new body should still be in the lower realm, right? Li Mu said expressionlessly, You will know if you try. Lord Qianhuan, you don't have to pretend in front of this king anymore. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon laughed mockingly and said, I can already see that you are only strong on the outside but weak on the inside. Who would have thought that the once high and mighty Lord Qianhuan would end up like this? Li Mu could tell that Chu Jiang of Gojoseon no longer cared whether he was Venerable Master Thousand Illusions or not after he figured out his background. A mere third-realm demon sect elder was no threat to him. The desire to ascend to the next level overcame his fear of Venerable Master Thousand Illusions. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon looked at him and said, Since you want this king to try, then this king will try. Above his head, the black mist suddenly condensed into two spears and shot towards Li Mu. Boom! Boom! Li Mu stood in place as two bolts of lightning descended from the sky and landed on the spear. The spear collapsed and turned back into black gas. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon said calmly, This king would like to see what else you can do. He did not get close to Li Mu and only controlled his ghostly aura to attack from a distance. In the sky before Li Mu, lightning snakes danced wildly and neutralized all of Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's attacks. He knew very well that Chu Jiang of Gojoseon was still testing him due to his fear of Venerable Master Thousand Illusions. The dermic powers expended by these attacks were negligible to Chu Jiang of Gojoseon. However, the frequent use of dermic powers caused Li Mu's dermic powers to be on the verge of being overdrawn. Not only that, but Li Mu also realized that the power of these lightning bolts was at least 30% weaker than usual in this 18 hellish hell formation. This was because a large portion of the power of heaven and earth was blocked by the blood-red formation above his head when he used his dermic powers. Heaven and earth are limitless. The universe borrows dermic powers. Dermic powers are born from the heart, and they multiply endlessly. Heavenly Lord Tai, as the law commands, he borrowed Madame Chu's dermic powers and used the demon-slaying protection spell again. The Bai sword turned into thousands of sword shadows and slashed towards Chu Jiang of Gojoseon. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon opened his arms and countless black mist burst out from his body. These sword shadows entered the black mist and disappeared without a trace. His figure walked out from the black fog, and he praised, as expected of Lord Thousand Illusions. Ordinary fourth-level bestial souls would have long been reduced to ashes under this ability. However, are you looking down on me, Lord? Li Mu was also helpless. His true cultivation was only at the beginning of the third level. Even if he gave it his all, he was no match for Chu Jiang of Gojoseon, who was already at the 6th level. Moreover, the dermic powers that he had high hopes for were weakened by the 18 hellish hell formation and could not be used to their full potential. Li Mu was just intending to withdraw the high-grade Strider Talisman to deal with King Chu Jiang when he suddenly had a flash of inspiration in his mind, and a thought gushed out into appearance. The reason why he could not use part of his dermic powers was not because he did not have enough dermic powers. It was because his body could not withstand the power of heaven and earth that those dermic powers summoned. With his current dermic powers, he could forcefully use the last few words of the 9 syllables mantra and the Book of Taoism. However, he would die from the backlash of the immense power of heaven and earth. However, in this 18 hellish hell formation, the power of heaven and earth that he summoned from his dermic powers would be weakened by this formation. When it landed on his body, it would not be so unbearable. Li Mu immediately made a hand seal and silently activated the swordsman word. The further back the 9 syllables mantra was, the greater the power of heaven and earth that it summoned. Li Mu originally still needed to cultivate for a few more months before he could withstand the power of heaven and earth. Now that he had recited it, he felt a wave of power of heaven and earth surge into his body, replenishing his almost depleted dermic powers. In the 9 syllables mantra, Lin referred to lightning, Bing referred to weapons, Do referred to battle, and swordsman referred to using the power of heaven and earth to recover dermic powers. When cultivators fought with others, they would expend their dermic powers. Whoever exhausted their dermic powers first would be the first to lose. To be able to fully recover one's dermic powers at any time was equivalent to having the ability to go on indefinitely. However, this technique was useless against Chu Jiang of Gojoseon. No matter how fast his dermic powers recovered, it would not exceed the 3rd level. However, this great formation of the 18 hells was a rare opportunity for Li Mu to comprehend Dao techniques. He quickly changed his hand seals and tried to comprehend the mantras that he had yet to learn. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon saw that Li Mu did not move from his original spot and became even more cautious. He thought of the terror of the 1,000 Illusions' venerable master and took a few steps back. 2 soul shadows walked out of his body and pounced towards Li Mu. The 2 soul shadows both had the aura of the peak of the 4th level. They each held 2 soul swords in their hands and slashed towards Li Mu's head. Li Mu's body was like a fish in water. He swam between the 2 soul shadows agilely. The 4 soul swords were swung in an airtight manner. However, they could not even touch the corner of Li Mu's clothes. The fighting mantra allowed Li Mu to predict the enemy's movements and react without thinking. He could only rely on his battle instincts. In the next moment, his body suddenly stopped. He allowed one of the soul swords to slash at his chest. That soul sword passed through Li Mu's body. Nothing happened to Li Mu's body. However, the green brick under his feet shattered. The wholeness mantra was a substitution technique. I am all things and all things are me. It could divert a certain degree of damage. Li Mu retreated. His hand seals changed again. The 2 soul shadows that were charging towards him stopped strangely in midair. Then they immediately collapsed. They were killed by a powerful force of the heaven and earth. The formation mantra was a trapping technique. It could trap the enemy and kill them with the power of the heaven and earth. The moment the 2 soul shadows disappeared, Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's body also disappeared. In the next moment, he appeared behind Li Mu. A ghostly hand passed through Li Mu's body and reached out from his chest. Li Mu turned his head and smiled slightly at Chu Jiang of Gojoseon. His body gradually became illusory and finally disappeared. Not far ahead, another Li Mu stood there, completely unharmed. The decuing mantra was a doppelganger technique. It could instantly create an illusory doppelganger. The original body and the doppelganger could shift positions and dodge fatal attacks. With the 18 nether prison formation blocking him, Li Mu was able to withstand the backlash of the heaven and earth power of the 7th word with his spirit condensation cultivation. He could forcefully use the 8th and 9th words, but he would definitely be injured. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon withdrew his hand. He looked at Li Mu from afar. His expression became extremely dark. This was the strongest and most troublesome spirit condensation cultivator he had ever encountered. His ability was no weaker than a cultivator who had just entered the 5th realm. As expected of the 1,000 Illusions venerable, he had countless Dao techniques. Even if his cultivation had fallen to the 3rd realm, Chu Jiang of Gojoseon would not be able to do anything to him. Not only that, but the heaven and earth power that these Dao techniques used would pass through the 18 nether prison formation. The 18 ghostly generals had to bear the brunt of this heaven and earth power. In this short period of time, the 18 pillars of light had dimmed. The power of the formation had also been weakened by 10%. If this continued, the power of the formation would continue to weaken. Heaven and earth are boundless. Wind and thunder receive orders. Dragons fight in the wild. 10 sides are destroyed. Heavenly Lord Tai, as the law commands. Li Mu formed another seal with his hands. He was using the 2nd incantation of the Demon Slayer protective art. Wind and thunder suddenly appeared beside Chu Jiang of Gojoseon. The wind was green and seemed to want to blow his soul away. The thunder was purple and struck his body. Even with his strong soul, it did not feel good. However, this was clearly not enough to threaten him. He reached out and formed a steel fork in his hand. He laughed coldly. Lord 1,000 Illusions, if this is all you have, then don't blame me for today. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's body disappeared. At the same time, Li Mu also felt a strong sense of danger. He did not hesitate to take out a fulu and stick it on his body. A steel fork appeared in the void. However, Li Mu had already disappeared. All that was left was an afterimage. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's body appeared. He looked at Li Mu in the distance with a solemn expression. In that moment, his speed had exceeded the limit of a assembled spirit cultivator. That was a speed that only Dongxian cultivators could achieve. Damn it! How many more Dao techniques does he have? He had never met such a troublesome assembled spirit cultivator. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon cursed in his heart. He held the steel fork and quickly chased after him. Li Mu stood on Bai as he utilized the Earth-rank Strider talisman to fly in the sky, whereas King Chu Jiang held the steel pitchfork in his hand as he pursued relentlessly from behind. Every time the distance between him and Li Mu shrunk, Li Mu would utilize the Strider talisman with all his might to pull the distance apart once more. The Spirit Travel Talisman could last for an hour. It was enough for Xuandu and the White Demon King to arrive. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon seemed to have seen through Li Mu's thoughts. He hovered in the air. After a while, he ignored him and landed on the square in front of the state temple. He glanced at Li Mu and prepared to sacrifice the people of the county to increase his cultivation. When he successfully advanced to the 6th stage of the Essence Soul Realm, no matter how mysterious the Thousand Illusions' divine ability was, he would definitely die. Li Mu stood in the sky and looked down at Chu Jiang of Gojoseon. It would take 5 minutes to activate the 18-een Prison Great Formation. Just a moment ago, he had already thought of a countermeasure. Li Mu looked up at the blood-colored Great Formation. His heart was filled with a sense of security. He slowly landed on the ground and formed a seal with his hands. After muttering a few words, he broke into a run. In the center of the formation, Chu Jiang of Gojoseon was using all his strength to activate the 18-een Prison Great Formation. Suddenly, he felt a strong sense of fear. He looked up and saw the 18 pillars of light rapidly dimming. The blood-colored Great Formation trembled violently for a moment and collapsed. Before he could activate the formation and sacrifice the people of the county, the Great Formation that he had spent so much effort to set up was gone. Chapter 188. Puff. Li Mu was halfway there when his body suddenly shook and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His aura weakened significantly. The power of heaven and earth was triggered because of him. In the end, he could not avoid the backlash. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's 18-een Prison Formation helped him block most of the power of heaven and earth triggered by chanting the Tao Te Ching. Only a small part of it landed on him. Li Mu was much stronger than when he was possessed by the Thousand Illusions Venerable. Although the backlash of the Tao Te Ching still injured him, it was not enough to make him lose his ability to move. Li Mu looked up. The blood-red curtain had disappeared, and the 18 light pillars were nowhere to be seen. It seemed that even the 18-een Prison Formation could not withstand the power of heaven and earth triggered by the first 2 sentences of the Tao Te Ching. After months of constant testing, Li Mu found that only the first 2 sentences of the Tao Te Ching, which had more than 5,000 words, could trigger the power of heaven and earth. With his spirit convergence cultivation, he could not even recite half a sentence under normal circumstances. Just now, to prevent Chu Jiang of Gojoseon from sacrificing the people of the county city, Li Mu recited the first 2 sentences of the Tao Te Ching for the sake of safety. The 18-een Prison Formation, which could trap the powerhouses of Dongxian to death, only lasted for a short moment under the powerful power of heaven and earth before it collapsed. The remaining power of the backlash also seriously injured Li Mu. Fortunately, he had made rapid progress in the past 2 months. If it was 2 months ago, he would have died under the backlash. In front of the state temple, Chu Jiang of Gojoseon looked up at the sky with a dazed expression. The blood-red curtain of light was gone. He did not feel the aura of the 18 ghost generals, which meant that they had been wiped out together with the formation under the immense power of heaven and earth. His plan to reach the 6th realm had failed. 5 years of hard work had turned to dust. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon looked up to the sky and let out a long howl. This howl was full of unwillingness and extreme resentment. At the last moment when the formation was broken, he sensed the source of the power of heaven and earth. It was the little constable, the one possessed by the Thousand Illusions Venerable Master. There was no longer any fear of honored Master Thousand Illusions in his heart. Instead, There was only a towering resentment. "I want you dead." Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's body turned into a cloud of black mist and swept towards Li Mu. Li Mu's injuries were not light. He could no longer activate the Earth-rank Spirit Strider Talisman. The 18-ine prison Great Formation had been destroyed, and he could no longer use the Mantra Dao technique that he had just comprehended. As the black fog closed in, he mobilized all the magic power in his body and formed a seal with one hand. Just as he was preparing to fight to the death, a white shadow suddenly flew out from the side, picked up Li Mu and quickly fled into the distance. Li Mu looked at Bai Yinshin, who had suddenly appeared. Without hesitation, he stuck the spirit travel talisman on her body and said, "Activate this talisman. He won't be able to catch up to you." As soon as he finished speaking, the two of them suddenly increased their speed. Whoosh! Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's face appeared in the black fog behind them. He threw out the steel fork in his hand. This object broke through the air and set off a series of sonic booms. It was even faster than the speed of the spirit travel talisman. The steel fork pierced into Bai Yinshin's shoulder from behind and collapsed into black fog. Bai Yinshin hugged Li Mu. Her body staggered and they both fell to the ground. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's body arrived in an instant and then suddenly stopped. A strong and familiar pressure appeared above his head. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon was no stranger to this pressure. His 18-ine prison Great Formation had been destroyed by this pressure. He stared at Li Mu with a venomous gaze and gritted his teeth. "Forcefully using a Dao technique that you can't use yet. Without the obstruction of the Great Formation, you will also die." Li Mu stood in front of Bai Yinshin and said calmly, "Take a step forward and you will also die." Chu Jiang of Gojoseon said in a low voice, "You are not Lord Qian Huan." Li Mu said indifferently, "Qian Huan is already dead. I killed him." Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's heart churned. "Who exactly are you? You won't have the chance to know." Li Mu hugged the unconscious Bai Yinshin and retreated quickly. At the same time, a few powerful auras approached from behind. Feeling those auras, Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's expression changed drastically. He could no longer care about Li Mu and retreated quickly. The 18-ine prison Great Formation had been destroyed and he had failed to advance. If he met a few enemies of the same level, he would definitely die. A few figures landed beside Li Mu. An old man hurriedly asked, "How is the situation in the county?" Li Mu looked at the North County governor and said briefly, "The 18-ine prison Great Formation has been destroyed. There are no casualties among the people. Quickly chase after Chu Jiang of Gojoseon. Good boy, rest first. Wait for me to return." The old man heaved a sigh of relief and laughed loudly. Then he chased after Chu Jiang of Gojoseon. Xuandu, Xiaoyu, and County Governor Chun did not say anything and left with the old man. The White Demon King looked at Bai Yinshin with concern and asked, "How is Yinshin?" Li Mu's right hand emitted a golden light and pressed it on Bai Yinshin's wound. He said, "Brother Bai, don't worry. I will take good care of her." The White Demon King nodded at him and disappeared on the spot. He chased after Chu Jiang of Gojoseon. County Governor Shen stayed on the spot and said in disbelief, "How was the 18-ine prison Great Formation broken? How did you stall Chu Jiang of Gojoseon for so long?" Li Mu said, "Now is not the time to talk about this. There are still some vengeful spirits and evil spirits in the county. Lord Shen, you have to get rid of them quickly and stabilize the people." The 18 Nether Prison Grand Formation needed to drive all the citizens of the city to the location of the 18 Ghost Generals. When the Grand Formation was activated, the blood essence and soul of those people would be extracted by the Grand Formation and used by King Chu Jiang, who was at the center of the formation. Li Mu had just tricked Chu Jiang of Gojoseon into personally killing most of the ghosts under him. There were still some ghosts left to drive the people away. The moment the 18-ine prison Great Formation was destroyed, the 18 Ghost General souls were scattered. In fact, even if it was a normal sacrifice, the final outcome of these 18 Spirit Realm ghosts was no different from the people who were sacrificed. At this moment, all the 5th Realm experts were chasing after Chu Jiang of Gojoseon. There needed to be someone in charge in the county. After County Governor Shin left, Li Mu used all his mana to heal Bai Yinxin's injuries. After the ghost fork that Chu Jiang of Gojoseon transformed into injured her, it also left a large amount of Yin ghost qi in her body. Li Mu used all his mana to force out traces of black qi from her body. After a moment, Bai Yinxin's long eyelashes trembled and her eyes slowly opened. Li Mu had already used up his last bit of mana and collapsed to the ground. Bai Yinxin helped him up and asked with concern, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Li Mu shook his head and asked, "How do you feel?" Bai Yinxin supported Li Mu with one hand and covered her shoulder with the other. She said, "I'm fine. What did you say to Chu Jiang of Gojoseon? He didn't kill you back then. Let's talk about it when we get back. Don't let them worry for too long." Bai Yinxin nodded. The two of them supported each other and stood up. They slowly walked towards the Yunyan Pavilion. Before they arrived, they saw a few figures running towards them anxiously. Bai Yinxin silently let go of Li Mu. Bai Tingxin's cultivation was the highest and she ran the fastest. She appeared in front of Li Mu almost instantly and jumped onto him. Just as her lips were about to land on Li Mu's face, Li Mu reached out his hand in time. She only kissed Li Mu's palm. Bai Yinxin pulled Bai Tingxin's ear and pulled her away from Li Mu. Li Mu walked in front of Lu Hanyan and said, "I'm sorry for making you guys worry." Li Mu felt his chest tighten. Lu Hanyan hugged him tightly. She hugged him very hard as if she wanted to fuse their bodies together. At this moment, Li Mu felt an emotion from Lu Hanyan for the first time. This emotion had no color, but it was more beautiful than the most beautiful color in Li Mu's eyes. He reached out and wiped away the tears in Lu Hanyan's eyes. He said, "Don't worry, it's fine." In the county city of North County, the 18-Een prison formation was broken. The bailiffs of the county government walked onto the streets to comfort the frightened people. Baiyun Mountain, the ancestral court of Fu Lu School. Late at night, a distant bell rang, waking up countless cultivators in the ancestral court of Fu Lu School. A few streams of light streaked across the sky and landed on the main peak. A few old men with white beards and hair stood in front of the Dao Bell. They looked at each other and were speechless. In front of the main hall of the main peak, a deep crack appeared on the Dao Bell that had been hanging there for an unknown number of years. Chapter 189. Half a year ago, the law bell, which had not rung for years, rang several times a day. After half a year of peace, another woman died with grievances. Before she died, her grievances resonated with the heavens and earth, giving birth to a new Dao technique, causing the law bell to ring again. Not long after, when the law bell rang again, a crack appeared on it. Such a thing had never happened before since the establishment of the Fu Lu School. An old man with white hair and a white beard stood in front of the cracked law bell. His gaze was deep, and he was silent. The head of the fifth branch, Hyun Jinko, walked forward and asked in a low voice, "Senior brother, this?" The old man said slowly, "The sound of the law bell is related to the strength of the Dao technique. The stronger the new Dao technique, the louder the sound of the law bell. To be able to crack the law bell, I'm afraid that a powerful Dao technique has been born. It's the North region again." Hyun Jinko said with a serious expression, "I'm afraid this is not a coincidence." The old man looked at a woman in a palace dress and said, "Such a Dao technique will definitely cause a phenomenon in the North region. Junior sister, please go down the mountain and investigate the reason." North region. Outside the city, 5 powerful auras surrounded Chu Jiang of Gojoseon from 5 directions. The crown on Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's head had already fallen off. His hair was disheveled, and his aura was extremely weak. Facing 5 experts of the same level, he had no chance of escaping. The North Region County Governor looked at him and said coldly, "Chu Jiang of Gojoseon, surrender." Chu Jiang of Gojoseon panted heavily. He looked around and realized that all his escape routes had been sealed. He knew that he could not escape today. He looked up at everyone and said sternly, "If it wasn't for that liar, do you think you can kill me with just trash like you?" They were also well aware that if it weren't for Li Mu holding back Chu Jiang of Gojoseon, Chu Jiang of Gojoseon would probably have already sacrificed all the citizens of the city and advanced to the sixth realm. At this moment, the roles of hunter and prey would have completely reversed. Until now, they still didn't know how Li Mu, a mere third realm cultivator, managed to hold off Chu Jiang of Gojoseon for as long as an hour, and how he managed to break the Grade 18 hellish prison formation. The White Demon King looked at Chu Jiang of Gojoseon and said indifferently, "Unfortunately, there are no ifs." The North County Governor said, "Everyone, attack with all your might and kill this fiend." 5 auras soared into the sky. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon stood in the middle, laughing towards the sky. "No one can kill this king. Yu Ming can't, Thousand Illusions can't, and trash like you can't either." As soon as his voice fell, a strong aura fluctuation suddenly came from his body. The North County Governor's expression changed drastically, and he immediately said, "Retreat!" Everyone quickly retreated. A powerful destructive force erupted from Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's position, destroying all life within a radius of several thousand feet. County City. Li Mu and Bai Yinxin were both quite injured. Lu Hanyan and Wan Wan supported Li Mu on both sides, while Xiao Bai and Bai Tingxin supported Bai Yinxin as they returned to their residence. Li Mu lay on the bed, while Lu Hanyan sat at the head of the bed. She didn't say a word as she silently wept. This was the first time Li Mu saw her cry. He held Lu Hanyan's hand and comforted her. "Don't be sad. I'm fine now." Lu Hanyan wiped her tears and sobbed. "If something happened to you, what would Wan Wan and I do?" Li Mu looked at her and asked seriously, "Do you want me to abandon you and run away alone?" He pulled Lu Hanyan into his arms and said, "Have some confidence in your man. Okay? A mere Chu Jiang of Gojoseon is nothing. Master Chen Huan is more powerful than him, right? In the end, he still fell into my hands." Lu Hanyan leaned against his chest and gently pounded it. "You're still trying to be brave at this time?" Li Mu looked at her tear-stained face and kissed her gently. "Believe me, I won't let anyone hurt you." Lu Hanyan did not respond to Li Mu with words. She used her lips to kiss Li Mu's lips. Cough. Bai Tingxin coughed at the door. Lu Hanyan hurriedly got up from Li Mu's body. In front of outsiders, she was still a little shy. She awkwardly wiped her lips and said, "I'll go see Miss Yinxin." Li Mu glared at Bai Tingxin. It was not easy for Lu Hanyan to take the initiative and be so enthusiastic, but this snake ruined the atmosphere. Bai Tingxin looked back and saw that Lu Hanyan had gone far away. She jumped on the bed and threw herself on Li Mu, kissing his face incessantly. "Shut up." Li Mu mustered his strength and pinched her mouth. He said in shock, "Are you crazy?" Bai Tingxin sat on top of him and snorted. "At that time, I swore that I would marry anyone who could save me. You saved me and my sister from Chu Jiang of Gojoseon. I want to marry you." "Nonsense." Li Mu glared at her and said, "Did you ask me? Did you ask your aunt?" Bai Tingxin said, "I can be the concubine." Li Mu said angrily, "I'm your uncle. What you're doing is incest. Get off me." Bai Tingxin giggled. "I'm not getting off." The snake was really crazy. Li Mu felt a few familiar breaths approaching quickly. He said, "Your father is here. Get off quickly." Bai Tingxin pouted. "Don't try to lie to me. I'm not getting off." "Tingxin." A majestic voice came from behind. Her body trembled and she immediately jumped off the bed. She stood obediently in the corner and bowed her head. "Father." The White Demon King and Xuandu walked in quickly. They asked with concern, "Third brother, are you okay?" "Don't worry, I won't die." Li Mu smiled and asked, "Where's Chu Jiang of Gojoseon?" County Minister Chan said, "Chu Jiang of Gojoseon knew that he was no match for him, so he self-destructed his soul. It's a pity that Lord Shen won't have the chance to take revenge personally." Li Mu looked at the White Demon King. The White Demon King knew what he was going to say. He smiled and said, "I've already collected the remaining soul power of Chu Jiang of Gojoseon and the 18 ghost generals." County Governor Lin walked forward and said to Li Mu, "You deserve the most credit for North County being able to avoid this calamity. I will personally write a letter to the imperial court and ask for a reward for you. Li Mu smiled and said, as officials of Great Zhou, our duty is to protect the people. This is what we should do. How did you stall Chu Jiang of Gojoseon tonight? County Governor Lin finally asked the question in his heart. It was also the question in everyone's heart. Li Mu had already thought of an explanation. He said, I lied to him and said that there was a level 7 ominous ghost suppressed under the state temple in the county city. If Chu Jiang of Gojoseon sacrificed the people of the county city, the ominous ghost would break out of the seal. At that time, even if he reached level 6, he would still be devoured by the ominous ghost and die. Everyone was shocked. They could not understand why Chu Jiang of Gojoseon would believe Li Mu so easily. Li Mu knew their doubts and continued. He didn't believe me at first. Later, I pretended to be Monk Chenhuan, and Chu Jiang of Gojoseon no longer suspected me. I lied to him and spent an hour preparing the array to suppress the ominous ghost. That was how I managed to stall him until you all arrived. County Governor Chun was stunned. He said, You pretended to be Monk Chenhuan? Li Mu nodded and said, When I was in Yangqiu County, a wisp of Monk Chenhuan's remnant soul wanted to possess me. Fortunately, a senior master came to my rescue and destroyed Monk Chenhuan's remnant soul. I also obtained some of his remnant memories. In these memories, there were old stories about Chu Jiang of Gojoseon. I used these to deceive him. Li Mu's words were half true and half false. He had a pure yang body. When he was in Yangqiu County, Monk Chenhuan had a deep relationship with him. Combined with Li Mu's testimony last time, it was not difficult to explain this matter. Obviously, both County Governor Chun and County Governor Lin were very familiar with the incident of Monk Chenhuan a few months ago. Both of them also knew that Li Mu had a pure yang body. Monk Chenhuan had once attacked him, but he was saved by a master whose Taoist name was Laozi. All these were recorded in the case file. County Governor Lin praised, It's really rare to have such astuteness at such a critical moment. He asked again, You also broke the 18 hellish prison formation, right? Li Mu did not deny it. He said, At that time, Chu Jiang of Gojoseon was ready to sacrifice all the people in the county. If I didn't break the formation, tens of thousands of people in the county would have become the sacrifices of Chu Jiang of Gojoseon. In a hurry, I had to curse the sky with the incantation of truth. I used the force of heaven and earth to break the formation. Actually, most of my injuries were caused by the backlash of the force of heaven and earth. If it were not for the 18 hellish prison formation, I'm afraid I would have been killed by the force of heaven and earth. County Governor Chan was stunned and said in astonishment, Is that possible? Li Mu said helplessly, At that time, the situation was urgent and I had no other choice but to take the risk. Fortunately, I succeeded. County Governor Chan said curiously, Although the force of heaven and earth is powerful, it is not easy to activate it. Does heaven have a special favor for you? In a sense, Li Mu was indeed favored by heaven. Every time he recited the Tao Te Ching, heaven wanted him to die on the spot. Li Mu looked at Xiaoyu behind Xuandu and said, Actually, I was also inspired by Xiaoyu's incident. Xiaoyu looked at Li Mu quietly and did not say anything. Chapter 190. The county governor and the county lieutenant left first. Chu Jiang of Gojoseon had caused a great commotion in the county city tonight. They needed to calm the people down. Xuandu and the White Demon King also left temporarily. Before they left, they transferred a trace of mana into Li Mu's body to heal his injuries. When Xiaoyu left, she winked at Li Mu, meaning that she would not expose him. Only she and Li Mu knew that the power of heaven and earth activated by that Taoist technique was not enough to break the 18-yin prison formation. However, the Tao Te Ching was Li Mu's biggest trump card. He had relied on it to safely survive 2 fatal situations. It was absolutely impossible for him to show it to others. Although there were some flaws in the half-true and half-false reason he made up, others could not verify it at all. After returning to the county office, County Governor Chun let out a long sigh of relief and said, That was close. The best thing we've done recently was to transfer Li Mu to the county office. If it wasn't for his quick wit to break the formation by cursing the heavens and stopping Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's plot and saving the people of the city, how can the two of us face His Majesty and the people of the North County after tonight? County Governor Lin looked at him and asked, Lord Chun, do you really believe that Li Mu broke Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's 18 prison formation by cursing the heavens? County Governor Chun smiled and said, everyone has their secrets. The crisis of the county city has been resolved. Is it important how he broke the formation? The two of them looked at each other and smiled. County Governor Lin said, whether Lord Chun believes it or not, I believe it. County Governor Chun laughed and said, I believe it too. Tonight in the county city of the North County, whether it was the government or the people, it was a sleepless night. The blood-red sky and the wandering evil spirits made countless people tremble in fear when they thought of it. No one knew exactly what had happened. They only vaguely heard from the officials that there was a demonic Tao cultivator who wanted to sacrifice the common people of the county city. In the end, he was stopped by the officials and his plan failed. All the common people of the county city were able to escape this calamity. Currently, the demonic Tao ferocious ghost had been annihilated by the combined efforts of the county governor and the county deputy. The lives of the commoners in the city were no longer in danger. Li Mu climbed up from the bed. The magic power in his body had already recovered a little. Only a few people knew the truth about what happened tonight. The North County official would not spread the news that he had stopped Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's plot and saved the people of the county. This was to protect him. Otherwise, Li Mu would become an important target of the demon sect in the coming days. He walked out of the room and wanted to see Bai Xin, but he found out that Bai Xin and her sister had been taken away by the White Demon King. Bai Xin had saved Li Mu at the critical moment and was injured because of Li Mu. Including the previous misunderstanding, this was the second time she had been seriously injured because of Li Mu. This made Li Mu feel guilty. He wanted to treat her again, but she had already left. It was late at night and the moonlight was bright. In the courtyard, no one was sleepy. Li Mu hugged Xiao Bai, who had transformed into her original form. Lu Hanyan and Wan Wan held his arms on both sides. They sat in the courtyard and looked at the moon above their heads. Lu Hanyan leaned her head on Li Mu's shoulder and suddenly said, Are we too weak? At the critical moment, we can't help you at all. Li Mu shook his head and said, The enemy is too strong. The cultivation world was very cruel. The enemies of the soul refinement realm were rarely in the soul refinement realm. Most of the time, the cultivators of the soul refinement realm would have to face experts with the divine ability. Even ordinary people could be involved in the schemes of the creation realm or Dongxian cultivators and die an unjust death. In the past half a year, Li Mu had seen too many such things. The words of the Thousand Illusions' venerable master actually made sense. In this world, the weak had no right to choose. Lu Hanyan's cultivation was actually not weak. She was already comparable to Hanja and the other disciples of the sect. It was just that she had met Chu Jiang of Gojoseon. Not to mention her, even the North County government, which had 2 creation realm experts, had almost fallen into the hands of Chu Jiang of Gojoseon. Li Mu patted her shoulder and comforted her. Don't think too much. Go to bed early. Last night, they went to bed very late. Lu Hanyan and Wan Wan did not sleep well, but Li Mu slept very soundly. The double overdraft of his mental and physical strength made him sleep until noon. After waking up, he felt refreshed. Although the injuries in his body were still not light, he just needed to rest and recuperate. Lu Hanyan went out with the basket and soon came back. The basket was empty. She said with some distress, There is no one on the street. The shops are closed, and there is no one selling vegetables in the market. After what had happened last night, although there were no actual casualties, most of the people were still in shock. It would take at least a few days for the order in the city to be restored. When Li Mu went out, he saw that all the shops were closed. Just as Lu Hanyan had said, there were not many pedestrians on the originally bustling street. The people who lived in the prefecture city had lived a peaceful life. This was probably the first time they had encountered such a situation. The Great Zhou only had 36 prefectures. Chu Jiang of Gojouzian dared to target a prefecture city, right under the nose of the ancestral court of Fulu School. He was truly audacious. Perhaps it was because of the importance of the prefecture city that no one had guessed that he would choose the prefecture city. Chu Jiang of Gojouzian did the opposite. Once he successfully advanced, even the Fulu School would not be able to catch him so easily. Li Mu walked along the street and headed toward the prefecture government. A woman dressed in palace attire was walking on the empty street. She stopped a passerby and asked, "What happened here? Why are all the shops along the street closed? There is no one on the street." "I don't know." The passerby remembered what had happened last night. Their faces were filled with fear. After shaking their heads, they quickly left. The woman in palace attire looked around in confusion. She counted with her fingers and muttered, "The power of heaven and earth is in chaos. I can't calculate anything. It seems that the source of the crack in the dowbell is here." After walking for a while, she met another passerby. She went up and stopped him. She asked, "May I ask what happened in the prefecture city? Why is the city like this?" The woman in palace attire in front of him was clearly someone from the Fulu School. On the left breast of her palace dress, there was a mysterious seal. This was the seal of the Fulu School. It seemed that what had happened last night had already alerted the Fulu School. Even if Li Mu did not tell her, she would have been able to find out from the prefecture government. Li Mu could not see through this woman's cultivation at all. This meant that she was at least a creation realm expert. Li Mu coughed softly and said, "Senior, one of the 10 kings of hell under the nether saint of the demon sect, Chu Jiang of Gojouzian, set up the 18 hellish prison formation in the prefecture city last night. He wanted to sacrifice the people of the prefecture city to advance to the 6th realm. The people of the prefecture city were disturbed by Chu Jiang of Gojouzian last night, which is why they are so panicked. The 18 hellish prison formation." The woman in palace attire was shocked. She asked, "The 18 hellish prison formation requires 18 spirit realm ghost cultivators to set it up. Once the formation is successfully set up, it can trap Dongxian to death. Did someone set up the 18 hellish prison formation last night?" Li Mu nodded and said, "The situation in the prefecture city was very dangerous last night. The people of the prefecture city were almost sacrificed by Chu Jiang of Gojouzian." The woman in palace attire had a look of disbelief. She said, "If someone really set up the 18 hellish prison formation, it would be impossible to break it without at least 2 Dongxian experts. How did the prefecture government break this formation?" Li Mu said slowly, "I have to mention that nameless hero." After a while, the woman in palace attire had already heard about the situation in the prefecture city from Li Mu. She took out a fulu and handed it to Li Mu. She said, "Thank you for your explanation. This fulu is for you." Li Mu took the fulu and his eyes lit up. It was an earth rank fulu. Judging from the runes on it, it was an earth rank sword talisman. Although it looked only at the low-grade earth rank, it could kill anyone below the fate realm with one strike. The fulu was not very useful to Li Mu. He could give it to Lu Hanyan to protect herself. She was indeed a master of the Fulu School. She was much more generous than the prefecture government. Li Mu wanted to thank her, but when he looked up, the woman in palace attire had disappeared. Li Mu put away the fulu happily and saw Li Si and Chun Miao Miao walking over hand in hand. Li Si stepped forward and asked, "I heard from my father-in-law that you were injured. Are you okay?" Li Mu said, "It's just a small injury. It's nothing serious." County Minister Chun clearly did not reveal anything to Li Si. The 3 of them walked all the way to the prefecture government. Before they stepped in, they heard a conversation in the courtyard. In the front yard of the prefecture government, County Governor Lin bowed to the woman in palace attire and said, "Greetings, Taoist Yuzenzi." The woman in palace attire smiled and said, "Long time no see, County Governor." After exchanging pleasantries, County Governor Lin asked, "May I know why Taoist Yuzenzi is here?" The woman in palace attire said, "I heard about what happened in the prefecture capital last night. This time, I came down the mountain on the orders of Senior Brother Sect Master for this matter. County Governor Lin sighed and said, Sect Master's Taoist Dharma is profound. He was far away at Baiyun Mountain, but he could still predict what happened in the North County. That's not the case. The woman in palace attire shook her head and said, Yesterday, a new Taoist technique was born in the North County and caused the Tao bell to crack. This time, I came down the mountain because of the damage to the Tao bell. Now it seems that the damage to the Tao bell on the main peak of Baiyun Mountain should be related to what happened in the prefecture capital last night. Li Si stood at the entrance of the prefecture government. He turned to look at Li Mu and asked, Why are you standing outside? Aren't you going in? Li Mu squeezed out a smile and said, You go in first. I suddenly remembered that I came out to buy groceries. I'll go buy groceries first. Chapter 191. Li Mu had once heard from Li Qing that there was a Tao bell on the main peak of Mount Baiyun. This Tao bell was an important treasure of Fulu School. It had been there since the founding of Fulu School. Whenever a new Tao technique was created, it would draw upon the power of heaven and earth. No matter how far away it was, the Tao bell could sense it. He learned from Li Qing that more than half a year ago, when Li Mu courted death by experimenting with Tao techniques in Yangshuo County, the Tao bell rang incessantly on the main peak of Mount Baiyun. Now it had cracked. Li Mu's Tao bell had cracked as well. The value of Fulu School's Tao bell was immeasurable. Even if Li Mu was sold, he would not be able to afford it. He did not know if the imperial court would take responsibility. After all, Li Mu had not intentionally damaged it. He had done it for the sake of the tens of thousands of people in the county capital. If Mount Baiyun was a little reasonable, it would not make him pay. If the imperial court had a shred of morality, it would not make a hero bleed and spend money. How powerful was Fulu School? They could hide for a while, but not forever. Li Mu turned around and walked 2 steps before turning back. County Governor Lin saw Li Mu walk in and said to the woman, The destruction of your Tao bell was caused by the power of heaven and earth. You can't blame anyone else, right? The woman said, County Governor, you misunderstand. This humble Taoist did not descend the mountain to pursue the matter. This humble Taoist was ordered by the sect master to understand the whole story. Hearing that he did not need to pay for the Tao bell, Li Mu heaved a sigh of relief. I see. County Governor Lin smiled and pointed at Li Mu. He said to the woman, Since Taoist Yuzhen wants to understand the whole story of yesterday's matter, you should ask Li Mu directly. The woman turned around and said in surprise, It's you. Li Mu bowed and said, Greetings, Senior Yuzhen. Yuzhen counted with his fingers and said in surprise, So you are that nameless hero. Li Mu said in shame, I dare not. I dare not. Yuzhen asked, Was it you who broke the 18 nether prison great array? Li Mu cleared his throat and repeated what he said last night. Yuzhen thought for a moment and said, This poor Taoist remembers now. Last time, the one who pointed at the sky and cursed and taught a peerless evil spirit that slaughtered a county magistrate's entire family was also you, right? Li Mu, this junior is ashamed. You don't have to feel ashamed. Yuzhen Zi looked at him a few more times and said, Since ancient times, there have been many people who have cursed the heavens and complained about the earth. However, you are the first one who has cursed the heavens to this extent. Li Mu was slightly delighted. It seemed that this Taoist Yuzhen Zi was quite easy to fool. However, in the next moment the woman's tone changed. She said, Although the heavenly Tao has a spirit, other than being activated by Taoist techniques, even if a cultivator points at the sky and curses, they rarely receive a response, let alone activating the power of the world that can destroy the 18 prison formation. County Governor Lin raised his eyebrows and asked, Taoist Yuzhen Zi, do you not believe me? Yuzhen Zi said, Unless he proves it again, it will be very difficult for others to believe. If he could prove it in front of Yuzhen Zi and County Governor Lin, then no one would doubt the matter of him breaking Chujiang of Gojoseon's formation. Li Mu thought for a moment and said, Proving it is not difficult. However, without the obstruction of the 18 prison great array, this junior cannot bear the backlash of the power of the world alone. Yuzhen Zi said, You can prove it to me. I will protect you. She threw out a bronze bell. The bronze bell spun a few times and turned into a giant bell. It floated above Li Mu's head and emitted a faint golden light that enveloped Li Mu. Li Mu looked up. This giant bell gave him a sense of security that was not inferior to Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's great array. This woman in palatial attire was most likely a Dongxian expert of F-Lu school. County Governor Lin took a step forward and said, Taoist Yuzhen Zi is the head of Baiyun Peak. His cultivation has already reached the peak of Dongxian. If it is convenient for you to prove it, feel free to give it a try. If it is not convenient, I believe Taoist Yuzhen Zi will not make things difficult for a junior like you. Baiyun Peak was the first lineage of F-Lu school. Li Mu had guessed that this woman in palatial attire was very strong. However, he did not expect her to be an expert on the same level as Venerable Thousand Illusions. Yuzhen Zi looked at Li Mu and said, This bell is a heaven-ranked magic treasure. It can withstand a strike from a transcendent expert. You can be at ease. This was a chance for him to dispel everyone's suspicions. Li Mu naturally would not let it go so easily. He thought for a moment. He formed a seal with one hand in his sleeve and pointed to the sky with the other. He said loudly, Earth, you do not distinguish good from bad. What is earth? Heaven, you are wrong to judge the virtuous and foolish to be the heaven. At the same time, he used a forbidden technique in his heart to recite, The Tao can be the Tao, but it is not the eternal Tao. Buzz. Just as he finished speaking, the sound of a bell rang in Li Mu's ears. The loud sound of the bell caused his scalp to go numb. A not very strong energy surged into his body. Li Mu's injuries hadn't healed yet, so he coughed up another mouthful of blood. He wiped the corner of his mouth and looked at Yuzhen Zi with a bitter expression. What happened to being at ease? Yuzhen Zi was also stunned. She looked at the deep crack on the giant bell and a pained expression appeared on her face. However, she quickly came to her senses and put away the giant bell. She walked forward and held Li Mu's wrist. Li Mu felt a gentle force surging into his body. The injuries in his body rapidly improved under this force and soon, he was completely healed. He was still worried that she would be angry if her bell was broken. Now, it seemed that this Taoist Yuzhen Zi was a reasonable person. Yuzhen Zi let go of his hand and said in shock, How can this be? Why can you trigger such a powerful force of heaven and earth? This should not be. Li Mu shrugged and said, I don't know either. Could this be the blessing of the heavens? Yuzhen Zi looked at him with a strange expression. Pure yang, pure yin, 5 elements physique, innate spirit eyes, and the ability to control fire and water. This was the true blessing of the heavens. People with these physiques were born with extraordinary cultivation talent. When they cultivated, they would achieve twice the results with half the effort. As long as one pointed to the sky and cursed, it would attract such a powerful force of heaven and earth. What kind of blessing was this? This was not the blessing of the heavens, but the wrath of the heavens. No one would hope to receive such a blessing. However, this seemingly useless ability had saved tens of thousands of people in the northern county. Such a powerful force of heaven and earth could directly destroy the 18-yin prison array from the outside and interrupt the ghost cultivator's sacrifice. Otherwise, even if there were cultivators from Dongxian present, they would not be able to change the outcome of tens of thousands of people being sacrificed. In the unseen world, everything seemed to be destined. County Chief Lin did not believe it at first, but when he saw this scene, he was stunned on the spot for a long time. He muttered, Could it be that he was targeted by the heavens because he cursed the heavens? This doesn't make sense. Yuzhen Zi was puzzled. The same Tao technique was used by the evil spirit with incomparable power. As the creator, he was punished by the heavens. Could it be that he is the person punished by the heavens? The physique of the heavens. Li Mu looked indifferent. As long as this matter could be resolved, he would accept that he was the person punished by the heavens. Yuzhen Zi and County Chief Lin were puzzled, but Li Mu was depressed. There were countless experts in the F-Lu school and so many experts in the imperial court. However, be it Venerable Master Thousand Illusions' plan or Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's plot, They were all resolved by him, a mere cultivator in the lower three realms. What made him most unhappy was that after resolving these matters, he still needed to come up with a reasonable explanation and prove to everyone. Lu Hanyan walked in from outside and looked at Li Mu. She said unhappily, "Your body hasn't recovered yet, why are you out again?" Yu Zhenzi and the county chief only cared about how he broke Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's array. Only Lu Hanyan cared about his body. Li Mu held her hand and said, "Let's go home." Lu Hanyan was held by Li Mu. When they were about to walk out of the county office, she turned back to look at Yu Zhenzi. Yu Zhenzi also turned his head and looked at Lu Hanyan with a puzzled gaze. "Wait." Yu Zhenzi suddenly spoke. Li Mu stopped and asked, "Senior, is there anything else?" Yu Zhenzi walked forward and sized up Lu Hanyan. Lu Hanyan also sized up Yu Zhenzi. The woman in palatial attire in front of her gave her a very amiable feeling. Yu Zhenzi seemed to realize something as a hint of joy appeared on his face. He asked, "You have a pure body?" Chapter 192. Lu Hanyan's expression changed slightly when the woman in palace attire saw through her constitution. She hid behind Li Mu. Li Mu's expression was strange. He was now clear that apart from the earth element, the other 6 types of physiques did not have any obvious characteristics. Even the experts of Dongxian would not be able to see through them at a glance. Even with the strength of Master Qianhuan, he still needed to go undercover in the county government and check the household register to find them. People's hearts were sinister. The pure body could not be known to outsiders. However, this expert of Fulu school did not want Li Mu to pay for the broken bell, so it was impossible for him to have any thoughts about Lu Hanyan. Li Mu introduced to Lu Hanyan, "Don't worry, this is Taoist Yu Zhenzi of Fulu school, a peak expert of Dongxian. He won't do anything to you." Lu Hanyan then bowed to Yu Zhenzi and said, "Greetings, Taoist Yu Zhenzi." Yu Zhenzi stepped forward and gently held Lu Hanyan's wrist. With a happy expression, he said, "You are indeed a pure body. Are you willing to enter Fulu school and cultivate with me?" Li Mu shielded Lu Hanyan behind him and said, "We appreciate Senior's kindness. She is my fiancée and has no plans to enter any sect." Yu Zhenzi's gaze swept over Li Mu and finally looked at Lu Hanyan. He said, "You should be able to sense that I am the same as you, a pure body. With your physique, ordinary Taoist techniques can only speed up your cultivation by several times. If you are willing to inherit my mantle and cultivate a pure cultivation method, you can enter the middle 3 realms within a year. Within 10 years, there is hope for good fortune." Yu Zhenzi handed a jade stone to Lu Hanyan and said, "I will wait for you for 3 days. Within these 3 days, no matter what decision you make, as long as you crush the spiritual jade, I will come to find you." After Li Mu thanked Yu Zhenzi, he took Lu Hanyan and left. When they began their true dual cultivation, it would not be difficult for both of them to enter the divine powers realm within a year. Although in the middle 3 realms each advancement would take decades, and if one's aptitude was not good, they would be stuck at the divine powers realm for the rest of their lives. However, with their physique, they could absorb spiritual jades during the day and cultivate yin and yang dual cultivation for 10 years. In the county government office, County Governor Lin asked, Taoist, do you want to accept a disciple?" Yu Zhenzi looked in the direction that Lu Hanyan had left in and said, "Pure yang is easy to find but pure yin is hard to find. Those foolish women and men who gave birth to pure yin girls would think that they were ominous people and would either abandon them or drown them. Those who were lucky enough to survive would easily die young." The moment the White Demon King took out the soul power of Chu Jiang of Gojoseon and the 18 ghost generals, it was sucked into the coffin. The soul power was gradually absorbed by the woman in the ice coffin. Her originally extremely pale face gradually recovered a trace of redness. Bai Yinxin stood beside Li Mu. She took out a white handkerchief from her bosom and carefully wiped the sweat off his forehead. Bai Tingxin took a look and also took out a green handkerchief to help him wipe off the sweat on his temples. The woman in the coffin was actively absorbing the ownerless soul power. As her soul became more and more solid, the Buddhist light's effect became greater and greater. The White Demon King looked at the woman's face in the coffin with an extremely nervous expression. The woman's eyelashes trembled. Finally, at a certain moment, she slowly opened her eyes. The White Demon King said excitedly, "Yeah, The lid of the ice coffin slowly opened. The woman sat up in the coffin. The blankness in her eyes gradually disappeared. She slowly looked at the White Demon King and muttered, "Husband." Li Mu and Xuandu left the ice cave at the right time. A moment later, a few figures walked out of the cave. The woman with 2 horns on her head bowed to Li Mu and Xuandu and said, "Greetings, uncles." Xuandu only smiled. Li Mu also smiled and said, "We're all brothers. Sister-in-law, there's no need to be so polite." The White Demon King smiled and said, "If it weren't for second brother and third brother, Ye-er and I probably wouldn't have been able to meet again. You must accept this bow from us husband and wife." The 2 of them held hands and bowed to Li Mu and Xuandu. The White Demon King then said to the Bai sisters, "You should also thank the 2 uncles." The 2 sisters could only bow and say, "Thank you, uncles." Li Mu raised his hands and said with a smile, "Congratulations on your family's reunion, big brother. It's all thanks to you." The White Demon King smiled and said, "Today is a great day. Let us drink to our heart's content." Although Li Mu's magic power increased quickly, his alcohol tolerance was still average. After drinking a few cups with the green ox spirit and tiger spirit, he felt a little dizzy. This was not an ordinary wine. It contained spiritual energy. Drinking it could increase one's magic power, but it could not be used to sober up. Bai Tingxin ran over from the side and filled Li Mu's cup. Li Mu waved his hand and said, "I can't drink anymore." Bai Tingxin raised the cup and brought it to Li Mu's mouth and said, "This wine was brewed by Uncle Ho using spirit fruits. Drinking it can increase your magic power. Drink more, drink more." Not long after, Li Mu lay motionless on the table. Bai Tingxin helped Li Mu up and said to the White Demon King, "Father, Uncle Li Mu is drunk. I'll take him to rest." The White Demon King waved his hand and said, "Third brother's alcohol tolerance is really hard to explain. Go." A devious smile appeared on Bai Tingxin's face. She carried Li Mu and walked into a bamboo house. She placed Li Mu on a bed with a green gauze curtain. She lowered her head and looked at him. She felt that his face was handsome no matter how she looked at it. It was not easy to get him drunk. This time, there was no one around, so she could do whatever she wanted. Bai Tingxin pouted and moved closer to Li Mu's mouth. She suddenly felt pain in her ear. She turned around and looked at Bai Tingxin with dissatisfaction and asked, "Sister, what are you doing?" Bai Tingxin pulled her ear and dragged her away from the bed. She said, "What am I doing? Do you still want to ask? What are you doing?" "I'm kissing him," Bai Tingxin said matter-of-factly. "Can't you see?" Bai Tingxin said angrily. "As a woman, don't you have any sense of shame?" Bai Tingxin said, "I'm not human." Bai Tingxin's chest heaved up and down. She said, "Didn't you say that he's just SOSO and that you want to wander the world and see more men?" "I realized that I was wrong." Bai Tingxin said, "After seeing more men, I realized that he's still the best. He can help us cultivate and protect us." Bai Tingxin said, "How many men have you seen?" Bai Tingxin shook her head and said, "I don't care. Anyway, I swore that I'll marry whoever saves us." Bai Tingxin advised, "Love is a matter between 2 people. You can't force a melon to be sweet. You can't do this." Bai Tingxin said indifferently, "Who cares if it's sweet or not? I'll twist it first. Get out of here." Bai Tingxin pulled her ear and brought her out of the room. She closed the door and said, "If you continue to be like this, I'll tell father and let him punish you by going into seclusion. You can only come out after 10 years. 10 years. Bai Tingxin suddenly looked at her and asked, "Do you want to lock me up and take all of it for yourself?" Bai Tingxin said angrily, "I think you're itching for a beating. I'll teach you a good lesson today." When Li Mu woke up, he found himself lying on a soft bed. The quilt covering his body had Bai Tingxin's scent. He vaguely remembered that Bai Tingxin seemed to have been drinking him last night. Li Mu drank a lot. He did not know what happened after that. Li Mu was shocked and quickly sat up from the bed. He found that his clothes were intact and there was nothing wrong with them. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. It seemed that although the snake was a little crazy, it had not reached the point of madness. After he got up, the door opened from the outside. Bai Yinxin brought him hot water, and Bai Tingxin put breakfast on the table. After Li Mu washed up simply, he saw that they were still sitting there. He said, "Sit down." Bai Yinxin sat down opposite Li Mu. Bai Tingxin touched her butt and stood obediently. Li Mu looked up and asked, "Aren't you going to sit?" Bai Tingxin shook her head. "I like to stand." Li Mu looked at Bai Yinxin and asked, "How's your injury?" Bai Yinxin covered her shoulder and said, "Much better." Li Mu stood up and walked over. He said, "Let me take a look." He walked behind Bai Yinxin and placed his right hand on her shoulder. A golden light appeared on his hand. She was injured by Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's attack. Actually, her injury was more serious than Li Mu's. Li Mu helped her force out the Yin ghost qi in her body. His mana was completely exhausted. Only after checking again did he know that her injury was still not light. Bai Yinxin dodged subconsciously. But when Li Mu's hand glowed with a golden light, the warm and numb feeling came again. Her face turned red and she sat there quietly. Bai Tingxin looked at Bai Yinxin enviously and said to Li Mu, "I'm injured too." Bai Yinxin's injury was caused by Li Mu. It was fundamentally different from her. Li Mu waved his hand and said, "My mana is limited. I can only help one. You take your time to recover." Chapter 193. You're biased. Bai Tingxin put her hands on her hips and expressed her extreme dissatisfaction with Li Mu. Recalling the scene of Bai Tingxin pouring wine on him last night, Li Mu shook his head and said, "If only you were half as obedient as your sister." When he first met Bai Yinxin, she was not much better than Bai Tingxin. During this period of time, Li Mu felt that she had changed from a naive little girl to a sensible and obedient girl. Comparing the two, Li Mu could not help but be biased. After a quarter of an hour, under Bai Tingxin's envious gaze, Li Mu withdrew his hand. Bai Yinxin's complexion also improved a lot. With the physique of a demon, the rest of her injuries could be completely healed after a period of rest. After breakfast, Li Mu and Xuandu said their goodbyes. Bai Yinxin and her sister's family had just been reunited. As outsiders, it was better not to disturb them. White Demon King took a jade box from the Tiger Demon and handed it to Xuandu. He said, "This is for second brother. Thank you for reuniting us." Xuandu did not reach out to take it. He shook his head and said, "Brother White, you're too polite. This is what brothers should do." White Demon King said, "This is a relic left behind by a 7th grade Prajna monk after he passed away. We cultivate the demon path. It's useless to leave it here." Xuandu was stunned for a moment. He reached out to take it and said, "In that case, I'll accept it." The relic of a 7th grade monk could not only be used as a magic treasure, but also to comprehend the realm of Buddhism. If it was in the hands of the Fugu school, it would be a top-grade talisman crafting material. It would be easy to craft a heaven-grade talisman. Li Mu clicked his tongue in wonder. This kind of thing was a precious treasure in Buddhism. It seemed that his big brother's wealth was far richer than Li Mu imagined. At this time, White Demon King took out an exquisite jade box from the Green Bull Demon and placed it in Li Mu's hand. He said, "There's a pair of magic treasures inside. I'll give them to third brother and sister-in-law." Li Mu opened the jade box and saw a pair of white jade rings inside. The two rings had a hollow design and an exquisite shape. The details were slightly different. One ring had a golden dragon embossed on it, while the other had a colorful phoenix wrapped around it. At first glance, it was obvious that they were a couple's magical treasures. The White Demon King explained, "This is a pair of flask heaven dharma treasures. The space inside is about the size of a house. Can be used for storage." Li Mu was taken aback and hurriedly said, "This is too expensive. The flask heaven art was a divine ability that could only be cultivated by a transcendent expert. It could be used to store anything and everything, and could also be used to create dimensions or immortals' caves. Only peak transcendent experts could use it to create magical treasures. The flask heaven treasures were all heaven-ranked treasures, and were so precious that Li Mu couldn't accept them with a clear conscience. The White Demon King smiled and said, "Take it. It's just a Dharma treasure. It's nothing." Under his insistence, Li Mu finally accepted the jade box. On the way to leave with Xuandu, Li Mu couldn't help but sigh. Brother Bai is really rich. Among the three brothers, Xuandu traveled the world with a Buddhist staff and an alms bowl. Li Mu's flying boat was rewarded by the county government, and Bai Yi was given to him by Li Qing. Everything he had before was either given or freeloaded. On the other hand, the White Demon King gave away a Buddhist sacred item and a pair of heaven-ranked magical treasures. Compared to him, Li Mu and Xuandu were really younger brothers. Xuandu also sighed and said, "It's said that the dragon race has many treasures. It seems that it's true." The Bai sisters' father was a snake, and their mother was a dragon. A snake actually managed to hook up with a dragon. No matter how one looked at it, this didn't seem like something Brother Bai would do. Speaking of which, the sisters also had half the blood of the dragon race. They didn't know if they would have a chance to become a dragon in the future. After returning to the county capital, Xuandu took Xiaoyu back to the Jinshan temple and continued to use Buddhist methods to purify the evil qi in her body. Li Mu could have taken a long vacation to recuperate, but Constable Zhao said that the county governor wanted him to go to the county government to receive his reward. Li Mu went to the county government as soon as possible. After not seeing County Governor Shin for 2 days, Li Mu felt that he was completely different. In the past, County Governor Shin always reeked of alcohol and had a decadent temperament. Now he was full of energy and was like an unsheathed sword, sharp and threatening. Li Mu asked tentatively, "Sir, have you reached the creation realm?" County Governor Shin didn't deny it. He smiled and said, "Let's go. This is the reward from the county government. Other than that, the reward from the imperial court should be coming soon." Li Mu followed County Governor Shin back to the Earth Pavilion. He guessed that he had saved all the people in the county, which was much more important than killing a few ghost generals. If the county government didn't let him choose 8 or 10 things from the Earth Pavilion, it would be a waste of his efforts. County Governor Shin glanced at the rows of wooden shelves in the Earth Pavilion and said, "The county governor said that you can take as many things as you can within 10 breaths. Li Mu was stunned for a moment and asked, "Is that true?" County Governor Shen said, "Since the county governor said so, you can take them without worry." The county governor didn't directly specify the number of things he could take. He must have considered that his contribution was too great. If he said too little, it would seem that he was stingy. If he said too much, the county government would lose too much. Li Mu was given 10 breaths. How much he could take would depend on his own ability. Li Mu asked in the end, "Does the county governor mean that everything I can take within 10 breaths is mine?" County Governor Shin nodded and said, "I suggest you take a closer look and choose what you want before you start." Li Mu shook his head and said, "There's no need. I can start now." Commandant Shin said, "All right. From now on, everything you can get from the Earth Pavilion will be yours for the next 10 breaths." Li Mu touched the ring on his finger. A white light flashed from the ring, and in the next moment, the Earth Pavilion became empty. The talismans, pills, magic treasures, and mountains of spirit jades were all gone. Even the wooden shelves that they were placed on were gone. Commandery Captain Shin looked around and finally fixed his gaze on Li Mu. Li Mu rubbed his hands and said embarrassedly, "The county governor is too polite." Although the county governor was polite, Li Mu couldn't be too greedy. In the end, he returned some things such as the magic weapons, pills, thunder talismans, and shelves that he didn't need. As for the high-grade spiritual jades, he didn't leave a single one behind. Not long after, County Governor Lin rushed over after hearing the news. He looked at the empty Earth Pavilion and said in disbelief, "He took so much in 10 breaths? Actually, he only took one breath. County Governor Shen said, I didn't expect him to have the flask heaven dharma treasure. County Governor Lin slapped his thigh and said regretfully, I was careless. Forget it. County Governor Shin shook his head and said, since these things are gone, we can ask for more from the imperial court. Without him, the tens of thousands of lives in the county would have been killed by King Chujiang. What's the use of these dead things? Li Mu returned home and poured out a large pile of spiritual jades in front of Yu Hanyun, Wan, and Little White. Yu Hanyun said in shock, didn't you go to the county office? Did you rob it? Li Mu had almost emptied the earth pavilion. Could be said that it was a robbery, but the county governor had tacitly agreed to it. After distributing the spiritual jades to Wan and Little White, Yu Hanyun pulled Li Mu into the room. After hesitating for a moment, she looked up at Li Mu and said, I want to go to White Cloud Mountain. Li Mu looked at her in surprise and asked, why? Yu Hanyun lowered her head and said, I don't want to be behind you every time we encounter danger. That night, I wanted to go out and help you so much, but I couldn't do anything. I'm your future wife, but I could only watch Miss Bai save you. I don't want to be a burden to you. No matter what danger we encounter, I want to face it with you. Li Mu looked at Yu Hanyun but couldn't say anything to comfort her. At this moment, he felt a strong sense of love from her. Li Mu didn't take the opportunity to absorb her love. Instead, he pulled her into his arms and asked softly, but this way, we won't be able to see each other often. Yu Hanyun looked up and said, 1 year. I'll only cultivate with Taoist Yuzenzi for 1 year. After a year, when I've learned the cultivation method of the purine body, I'll go down the mountain to find you. At that time, you'll marry me. Li Mu said, but this year, we can't dual cultivate every night. Yu Hanyun rested her head on his chest and said softly, it's only 1 year. It's nothing to bear with it. Li Mu knew that Yu Hanyun found it harder to control her desire for dual cultivation than he did. However, she was also the one who suggested going to White Cloud Mountain to cultivate. Her body was filled with love. At this moment, Li Mu finally understood what Li Si's words meant. Liking was liking, love was love, liking was possession, love was giving, liking was unbridled and willful, love was restraint and tolerance. Li Si had once said that Li Mu needed to get married to Yu Hanyun and spend a few years together before he could understand the true meaning of love. The life and death crisis brought by King Chujiang had brought forward this time by a few years. Li Mu lowered his head and asked with a smile, aren't you afraid that I'll fall in love with other vixens while you're away? The tears on Yu Hanyun's face had yet to dry. She pinched Li Mu's waist fiercely and said angrily, you dare! Li Mu flipped his hand and a jade box appeared in his palm. Under Yu Hanyun's surprised gaze, he opened the jade box and took out the rainbow phoenix ring. He knelt on one knee and raised his head to look at her, asking, Miss Yu Hanyun, are you willing to marry me? P.S. At this point, if there are still people who think that this plot is feeding you sh*t and poisoning you, then you really don't need to continue reading. As the author, I advise you from the bottom of my heart. I really mean it from the bottom of my heart. I don't have any intention of ridicule or anything else. Don't read anymore, don't read anymore, don't read anymore. This book isn't suitable for you. Everyone's money doesn't grow on trees. Isn't it better to subscribe to a book that doesn't feed you sh*t and poison you? As for those who are guessing the plot and setting later and ridiculing the author, please stop. This is the biggest stupidity. Chapter 194. Lu Hanyan stared at Li Mu in a daze. She had never seen anyone propose in such a way. Li Mu half knelt on the ground and urged, hurry up and say that you're willing? Lu Hanyan blushed and whispered, how can you rush me like that? If you're not willing, I'll ask someone else. Do you want to die? A moment later, Lu Hanyan snuggled up in Li Mu's arms. Li Mu held her slender waist and asked, can you not go? The relationship between the two had just leveled up. Li Mu really couldn't bear to part with her. I don't want to go either. Lu Hanyan sighed softly and said, aren't the experts at the peak of Dongxian very powerful? If you can cultivate with her for a year, you'll definitely learn a lot of things that you can't learn outside. At that time, maybe I'll be the one to protect you. This sentence was not wrong. Fulu School was one of the 6 Taoist sections. It had a deep heritage and many divine abilities that were not passed on. Only the disciples of the sect could cultivate them. He and Li Mu practiced yin-yang dual cultivation together. Although the speed of their cultivation was not slow, they could only receive systematic guidance in cultivation in famous sections. At present, Li Mu was just an unorthodox cultivator. It was just that his path was too unorthodox. He was so unorthodox that he was always punished by the heavens. He was so unorthodox that even the disciples of famous sects had to avoid him. There was another point that Li Mu was more worried about. Lu Hanyan's cultivation speed was even faster than Li Mu's. If there was a cultivator at the peak of Dongxian guiding her cultivation by her side every day, it was inevitable that she would surpass Li Mu in a year. Perhaps a year later, she would have stepped into the divine ability realm, and Li Mu would still be in the attaining spirit realm. At that time, his status in the family might drop by 1 place. He was reluctant to part with Lu Hanyan, but he also knew that he could not change her decision. She was not the kind of person who was willing to hide behind a man and be protected by others. The incident with Chu Jiang of Gojoseon had deeply stimulated her. So much so that she did not hesitate to make the decision to temporarily separate from Li Mu. A year's time was neither long nor short. Since he could not change it, Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "Then I'll visit you at Mount Baiyun once a month." The county capital was not too far away from Mount Baiyun. A round trip, including the time spent together, would take at most 3 to 5 days. The county minister would definitely approve of 3 to 5 days of leave every month. Lu Hanyan crushed the jade talisman. In an instant, Yuzhen Zi appeared in the courtyard. She looked at Lu Hanyan and asked, "Have you made up your mind?" Lu Hanyan asked, "After becoming a disciple of the Fulu School, can I get married?" Yuzhen Zi nodded. She looked at Li Mu and said, "Yes, you can even enter the sect with him. Unfortunately, the Great Zhou court probably won't agree." In the past, Hyun Jinko had once invited Li Mu, but Li Mu had refused. At that time, if he had resigned from his position and entered the Fulu School, there would have been no resistance. Things were different now. After the incident with Xiaoyu, Li Mu was now the ambassador of the imperial court. It was impossible for him to join a sect so casually. After understanding these things, Lu Hanyan said to Yuzhen Zi, "Can I stay for a few more days?" Yuzhen Zi said, "Whenever you want to leave, you can leave." Yuzhen Zi was very tolerant of Lu Hanyan. She herself also had a pure yin body and was most familiar with this kind of constitution. It was naturally best for Lu Hanyan to cultivate with her. Her decades of experience could allow Lu Hanyan to avoid many detours. Cultivating with her was even more suitable for her than dual cultivation with Li Mu. Of course, the best situation would be for her to cultivate with Yuzhen Zi for a year. After establishing a good foundation, she could return to dual cultivate with Li Mu. A short separation was only for a better reunion. It was only a year. Li Mu could use such a reason to comfort himself. After Yuzhen Zi left, Lu Hanyan held Li Mu's hand and said, "In these few days, do your best to absorb my emotions and condense the final soul." Only then did Li Mu realize her purpose in forcing him to stay for a few days. He hugged Lu Hanyan and sighed, "Why are you so silly?" Lu Hanyan shook her head and said, "When you faced Chu Jiang of Gojoseon alone, weren't you also very silly?" 3 days later, Lu Hanyan and Yuzhen Zi were going to White Cloud Mountain. Lu Hanyan gave Wanwan 2 choices. Wanwan hesitated for a long time but still decided to go with her. Lu Hanyan also gave Xiaobai a choice. She chose to stay by Li Mu's side. Li Mu hugged Xiaobai and stroked her head. He said, "In the next year, only the 2 of us will depend on each other." Xiaobai used her head to rub Li Mu's chest and said, "I will always accompany Benefactor." Besides accompanying Li Mu, Xiaobai also had a mission. It was to ensure that there was no other fox spirit by Li Mu's side besides herself. This was the mission Lu Hanyan had given her. After Lu Hanyan left, the matters of the Yunyan Pavilion fell to Zhang Shan's sole responsibility. In the past few days, he had already completely immersed himself in the role of shopkeeper. According to Lu Hanyan, Zhang Shan was very talented in business. He was especially sensitive to accounts. He had clearly never studied, but his sense of smell in this aspect was even sharper than the most brilliant accountant. When he drank with Zhang Shan and Li Si, Li Mu unexpectedly learned from Li Si that Chen Miaomiao was also going to the Fulu school to cultivate. She was relying on her relationship with Governor Chen. It was said that Governor Chen was very close to an elder of the third branch. Li Mu said in surprise, "She's willing to leave you?" Normally, Chen Miaomiao would stick to Li Si at all times. When he heard this news, Li Mu was even more surprised than when he heard that Lu Hanyan was going to mount Baiyun. Li Si shook his head and said, "That night, in front of Chu Jiang of Gojoseon, we were completely powerless to fight back. Miao Miao said that she wanted to cultivate properly and come back to protect me in the future." Zhang Shan gnawed on the pork shoulder and shook his head. "This girl is really stupid. Eat your pork shoulder." Li Mu glanced at him and said, "What do you know? This is called love?" Li Si looked at Zhang Shan pitifully and shook his head. "Why are you telling him this? He probably won't understand in this lifetime." 4 days later, Mount Baiyun, Baiyun Peak. Baiyun Peak was the first branch of the ancestral court of Fulu School, and it was also the strongest branch. The head of Baiyun Peak, Yuzhen Zi, had already reached the peak of Dongxian. Among her peers, she was only slightly inferior to the headmaster. This time, Li Mu also came with Yuzhen Zi. This was his first time coming to the ancestral court of Fulu School. After getting a clear understanding of the mountain gate, it would be a walk in the park for him to come again in the future. "Greetings, head marshal uncle." At the top of Baiyun Peak, in a Dao palace, several old men and women bowed to Yuzhen Zi. Li Mu stood in the hall and looked at these creation realm experts. When he looked at Yuzhen Zi again, he was almost certain that she was definitely over 100 years old. Yuzhen Zi held Lu Hanyan's hand and said to everyone, "This is the new disciple I took in after leaving the mountain." After saying that, she said to Lu Hanyan, "These are your senior brothers and sisters." Lu Hanyan looked at the white-haired people and bowed. Lu Hanyan greets senior brothers and sisters. After being stunned for a moment, they immediately said, "Junior sister Lu, there's no need to be so polite." Before Li Mu came, he did not realize this. Yuzhen Zi's seniority in Fulu School was extremely high. She was of the same generation as the headmaster and was even above the creation realm elders of the various peaks. Becoming Yuzhen Zi's disciple meant that she was of the same generation as the elders of the various peaks. Compared to young disciples like Li Qing and Hanja, she was of an entire generation higher. If Hanja and Li Qing met her in the future, they would have to call her marshal uncle. After introducing each other, Yuzhen Zi said, "Hanyan has just arrived at Baiyun Peak. If any of you have time, bring her around the peak to familiarize herself." An old woman said, "This disciple happens to be free." Lu Hanyan was clearly not used to being with these senior brothers and sisters who were much older than her. She hurriedly pulled Li Mu out of the Dao Palace. A young disciple walked in from outside. When he saw her, he was stunned for a moment and asked in confusion, "Junior sister, are you new? You look a little unfamiliar." "Impudent!" A stern voice came from inside. The young disciple looked at an old man and said in a trembling voice, Master." The old man's face darkened as he strode out and said, "Don't be rude. This is Marshal Uncle Lu. Hurry up and greet her." The young disciple was stunned for a moment before he immediately lowered his head and said, "Greetings, Marshal Uncle Lu." "No need for formalities, no need for formalities." Lu Hanyan waved her hand and pulled Li Mu out as if she was escaping. The young disciple was left in place with a blank and shocked expression. The two of them were led around Baiyun Peak by the old woman. After familiarizing themselves with the peak, the old woman pointed at a towering peak in front of them and said, "That is my Fulu School's main peak. Junior sister Lu, do you want to go take a look at the main peak?" On Baiyun Peak, being called Marshal Uncle by many disciples of the same age as her or even older than her made Lu Hanyan feel uncomfortable. She nodded her head and said, Then let's go take a look at the main peak. The old woman summoned a cloud. Li Mu and Lu Hanyan stepped on the cloud and slowly flew up to the main peak. After Li Mu landed, he looked up and saw a huge bell suspended in the air. There were simple patterns on the huge bell. At a glance, one could tell that it was an old object. There was a deep crack across the body of the bell. Li Mu instantly realized that this was most likely the Dao bell of Fulu School. Just as he was about to follow the old woman and Lu Hanyan to the main hall in front, he heard a soft sound just as he took a step forward. Li Mu looked up and saw that the Dao bell had begun to shake violently. It seemed to be trembling. In the square in front of the main hall, the disciples quickly noticed this scene. What's wrong with the Dao bell? Why is it shaking so violently? Why do I feel like the Dao bell is shaking? Is it afraid of something? That can't be. What could make the Dao bell afraid? Li Mu felt a little guilty. He had a feeling that the shaking of the Dao bell had something to do with him. He tentatively lifted his foot. Before he could take a step, he saw a scene that shocked him to the core. The moment Li Mu lifted his foot, the Dao bell in the air shook even more violently. It suddenly broke free from its frame and flew straight into the depths of the clouds. The disciples stared blankly at this scene. After a long time, someone finally spoke in shock. The Dao bell ran away? Chapter 195. On the main peak of Mount Baiyun, the Dao bell trembled and flew straight into the depths of the clouds. Li Mu was dumbfounded. The Fulu School disciples in front of the square were also dumbfounded. They had been in the sect for several years. They had not seen this scene for decades, but in the past half a year, they had seen it all. The moment the Dao bell escaped, streams of light shot into the sky from the peaks of the Fulu School and disappeared into the clouds. Li Mu hurriedly walked to Lu Hanyan and the old woman and asked in shock, "What happened? Why did the bell run away?" The old woman's expression was solemn as she said, "The Dao bell has a spirit. It can't have produced such a phenomenon for no reason. It must have encountered something that scared it. What kind of demon is so bold as to break into Mount Baiyun?" As soon as she finished speaking, the clouds rolled and the Dao bell appeared again. A few figures were protecting it. Among them was Hyun Jinko, whom Li Mu had seen once, and Yuzhen Zi. The other people had obscure auras. They were obviously the strongest of the ancestral court. An old man with an immortal aura flew out from the Dao Palace on the main peak. He flew to the side of the Dao bell and gently stroked it as if he was whispering something. It felt like a junior who had been bullied and had found his elders to back him up. A bad feeling arose in Li Mu's heart, and he quietly hid behind the old woman. The sage-like old man said a few words to the Dao bell before he suddenly looked down. At the end of his line of sight was Li Mu. The few Dongxian experts also focused their gazes on Li Mu. Yuzhen Zi looked at Li Mu and then at the Dao bell. He seemed to have realized something and transmitted a few words to the old man. The old man nodded and said, "The Dao bell cracked because of him. The Dao bell must have sensed his aura and felt fear." Li Mu felt goosebumps all over his body as he was stared at by these people. He was secretly worried that they would force him to pay for the clock once they were in the Fulu School's territory. This was not the county yamen, and there was no one behind him to back him up. Everyone descended from the sky. The old woman immediately bowed and said, "Greetings, martial uncle sect leader. Greetings, martial uncles." Yuzhen Zi looked at Lu Hanyan and introduced her to everyone. "This is the new disciple that I took in when I went down the mountain." Lu Hanyan hurriedly saluted. Lu Hanyan greets martial uncle sect leader and martial uncles. The sage-like elder looked at Yuzhen Zi and said with a smile, "Congratulations, junior sister. You've finally fulfilled your wish and found a successor." The others also congratulated her. "Congratulations, senior sister." Yuzhen Zi glanced at them and asked, "Are you just congratulating me?" A middle-aged man was stunned for a moment before he realized something. He flipped his right hand and a fulu appeared in his palm. He smiled and handed the fulu to Lu Hanyan, saying, "This is the first time we've met. This is Martial Uncle's gift. Martial niece Lu, please accept it." The spiritual power circulating on this Fulu was probably of a higher level than the Fulu that Wu Bo had used before. Lu Hanyan looked at Yu Zhenzi. Yu Zhenzi nodded and said, "This is the golden armor talisman. Can summon a sixth realm divine weapon. Although it's only a consumable item, it's also Martial Uncle Zhengyang Zi's kind intentions. Please accept it." Lu Hanyan accepted the Fulu and said, "Thank you, Martial Uncle Zhengyang Zi." Yu Zhenzi looked at another young woman and said, "This is Martial Uncle Dan Yangzi of Danxia Peak. Martial Uncle Dan Yangzi's alchemy skills are at the peak of perfection. She's not inferior to the Danding sect." The young woman stretched out her hand and a jade box appeared in her palm. The jade box was crystal clear and one could vaguely see a pill lying inside. She smiled and said, "I've refined this pill recently. After taking it, it can make one's appearance forever and not age. It also has the effect of tempering the body and can expel the acquired impurities in the body. From then on, you'll be immune to all poisons and evils." Yu Zhenzi took the jade box and placed it in Lu Hanyan's hand, saying, "Martial Uncle Dan Yangzi can only refine a few heaven-grade pills in a year. Hurry up and thank her." Lu Hanyan accepted the jade box and said embarrassedly, "Thank you, Martial Uncle Dan Yangzi." Yu Zhenzi looked at the other old man and said, "This is Martial Uncle Yu Quanzi of Purple Cloud Peak. I heard that he obtained a heaven-grade armor a few days ago." Yu Quanzi laughed bitterly. A white light flashed in his hand and a silver-threaded soft armor appeared in his palm. He said, "This armor was obtained from a 1,000-year-old silkworm demon in the bitter cold of the myriad demons' country. It can withstand a full-force attack from a sixth realm cultivator. I'll give it to Martial Niece Lu for self-protection." Although it pained him to give away the armor, his senior sister had already asked for it. He had to give it to her. If he angered her, she would call him out for no reason and check his cultivation progress. If she beat him up from time to time in front of all the disciples, would he still want his old face? Senior sister Yu Zhenzi had spent a lot of effort to find a successor. Over the years, she had found many people with a pure Yin body. It was either their gender did not match or they were too old. Most of them were abandoned by their parents or drowned. It was not easy to find one. Today, she had to give it to her. Lu Hanyan accepted the soft armor and said, "Thank you, Martial Uncle Yu Quanzi." Yu Zhenzi then looked at Hyun Jinko and said, "This is Martial Uncle Hyun Jinko of Qing Xian Peak. Martial Uncle Hyun Jinko is my direct junior martial brother. I watched him grow up and I was also the one who guided him into the path of cultivation." Hyun Jinko had already taken out a Fulu card. When he heard Yu Zhenzi's words, he silently kept it. A white light flashed and a long sword appeared in his hand. Yu Zhenzi was shocked. "You plan to give away the Qing Xian sword?" Hyun Jinko looked at the Qing Xian sword longingly and said, "Senior sister has found a good disciple. Junior martial brother is happy for her. A sword is nothing?" Yu Zhenzi took the Qing Xian sword from his hand and said, "At least you still have some conscience. Hanyan, why aren't you thanking Martial Uncle Hyun Jinko?" Lu Hanyan took the sword and said, "Thank you, Martial Uncle Hyun Jinko." Li Mu secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. None of the things that these people gave were lower than the heaven rank. All of the things that Li Mu took from the county office's Earth Character Pavilion could not compare to one of these. This trip to Mount Baiyun was indeed not in vain. At the same time, his heart was somewhat sour. Fulu school favored girls over boys. It was too obvious. When Hyun Jinko invited him, he was only casually asking. After being rejected by Li Mu, he did not follow up. If Li Mu had Lu Hanyan's treatment back then, perhaps he would have already become a disciple of Fulu school. Unfortunately, Fulu school did not have a pure yang body first seat and needed him to inherit the mantle. Although the probability of a pure yang body and a pure yin body were about the same, due to the common people's preference for boys and the ignorant concept that a pure innate character was a heavenly calamity star that would jinx their parents and relatives, very few girls with a pure yin body could survive. Yu Zhenzi finally looked at the old man with the demeanor of an immortal and said, "This is the head martial uncle. He is the head of a sect, so he will definitely be more generous than the martial uncles of the head martial uncle." The old man shook his head and took out a jade stone. He said, "There is a Tao page in here. After reading it once, it will disappear. Whether or not she can comprehend a Tao technique will depend on her luck." Tao page. Li Mu was secretly shocked. Today's 6 sects of Taoism all came from the Tao scripture. The Tao page was a page of the Tao scripture. Fulu School's head martial uncle said that this Tao page could allow one to comprehend a Tao technique. It must be a page of the Tao scripture. Although Tao techniques and Abhijna were both spells, there was a fundamental difference. Abhijna needed to be cultivated and comprehended. It was based on one's own mana. If one's aptitude was poor, even if they were given the method of cultivating Abhijna, they would not be able to learn it. Tao techniques were the operation of the power of heaven and earth. There was no need to cultivate. As long as one grasped the mantra mudra, they would have the key to opening the door to heaven and earth. To be able to let Lu Hanyan comprehend a Tao page meant that he truly treated her as an inner disciple of Fulu School. Yuzenzi took the jade stone and said to Lu Hanyan, "There are still a few uncle masters who are wandering outside. When they return, I will bring you to meet them one by one." After Lu Hanyan and the few first seats got to know each other, everyone looked up at the Tao bell. The bell was still hanging in the sky. When it felt Li Mu's gaze, it retreated. Li Mu stretched out his hands and said, "I didn't do anything." The old man smiled helplessly and said, "The Tao bell has been here for almost 1,000 years. It has already developed intelligence. It was hurt by you, so it will naturally be afraid of you. If you treat it kindly, it will not be afraid anymore. I'll give it a try." Li Mu nodded and looked at the bell with a kind smile on his face. Buzz! The Tao bell trembled a few times and flew up again, disappearing into the clouds. The smile on Li Mu's face froze. The old man shook his head and said, "Forget it. Let it be." They no longer paid attention to the Tao bell. Instead, they looked at Li Mu. Their gazes contained a strange power. This made Li Mu feel as if he had been stripped naked and was standing in front of everyone. How can there be such a heavenly retribution physique? This is simply unheard of. He also has a pure yang physique. Could it be that a pure yang physique will be punished by the heavens when cursing the heavens? If it is the heavens' retribution, why would it cause the Tao bell to ring and even cause it to crack? Didn't the head teacher say that the Tao bell had indeed sensed a new Tao technique? It could not withstand the power of the heavens and earth that was triggered by the Tao technique, so it cracked. Everyone looked at Li Mu and discussed endlessly. In the end, the Fulu School's head teacher waved his hand and said, "Enough. The matters of the heavens and earth are mysterious and difficult to understand. Even we can only see a sliver of it. The crack on the Tao bell will repair itself. There is no need to discuss this matter anymore." When everyone heard this, they all fell silent. The might of the heavens was unpredictable. Cultivators understood the heavenly Tao and followed the heavenly Tao. This was also the reason why the Fulu School was unwilling to make a move after the evil spirit in the North County was born. There was naturally a reason for the crack on the Tao bell. Perhaps there was some kind of heavenly Tao law behind it. It was not to be recklessly discussed. The few grotto profound experts looked at Li Mu with astonishment in their eyes. Even though they had cultivated for decades and had profound cultivation, this was the first time they had heard of such a thing. Although he would be punished every time he cursed the heavens, this was also a response from the heavens and earth. And this was what these Dongxian cultivators yearned for even in their dreams. When they could casually create Tao techniques like him and receive a response from the heavens and earth, it would be the time for them to advance and transcend. They also wanted the heavens' retribution. Chapter 196. After the headmaster spoke, these people did not seem to want Li Mu to compensate, nor did they investigate why he was always punished by the heavens. Li Mu felt relieved for himself, but at the same time, he did not have to worry about Lu Hanyan anymore. Lu Hanyan's situation on Mount Baiyun was completely different from what Li Mu had expected. He had expected that the experience of pure Yin would be more popular, but he did not expect it to be this popular. She had become the martial aunt of the younger generation in a flash. She received so many gifts that even Li Mu was envious. On Mount Baiyun, Lu Hanyan stuffed the golden armor talisman, the soft ice silkworm armor, and the Qingxian sword into Li Mu's hands. She said, "I have no use for these things in the school. You can have them." His own woman knew how to care for him. However, Li Mu still shook his head and said, "These are gifts from the peak masters. It is not good for me to take them." Lu Hanyan said, "Since they are gifts for me, I have the right to deal with them. I will not encounter any danger when I cultivate in the school. You are different. You have to deal with demons and ghosts all day long. I am worried." In order to reassure Lu Hanyan, Li Mu accepted the Fulu talisman and the soft ice armor. He left the Qingxian sword behind and said, "This sword seems to be very valuable. You should keep it with you. You just happen to lack a sword." The jade hairpin that Li Mu gave to Lu Hanyan was only a Shen-class magic weapon. The Qingxian sword was obviously a Heaven-class weapon. Even Hyun Jinko felt the pinch when he gave it away. If Li Mu took it away and he found out, it would not be good. Lu Hanyan looked at the bai in Li Mu's hands and said unhappily, "You don't want the sword I gave you, but you want the one from Arrestor Li." Li Mu explained, "I've gotten used to using this sword. Besides, there's a sword spirit in it. The Qingxian sword is too precious. It's the treasure of the Fulu school. If I take it away and Taoist Hyun Jinko finds out, what would he think?" Lu Hanyan didn't insist, but said, "Since you have the chance to come to Fulu school, aren't you going to see Constable Li?" Li Mu. "He left the sect a long time ago." Lu Hanyan looked at him and asked, "How did you know?" Li Mu explained, "The last time Constable Han went down the mountain, he mentioned it in passing." Lu Hanyan pursed her lips and said, "You always remember Constable Li's matters so clearly. At this time, it was best not to follow up on this topic." Li Mu immediately said, "You and Wan Wan go take a look at the residence first. Since I've come to Mount Baiyun, I have to meet Hanja." Hanja was in the 5th branch, which belonged to the Qingxian Peak. After walking out of the Taoist palace of Baiyun Peak, Li Mu said to the old woman, "I have an old friend in Qingxian Peak. Senior, can you bring me to Qingxian Peak?" The old woman nodded and brought Li Mu to another peak on a cloud. The old woman who led Li Mu and Lu Hanyan to familiarize themselves with the sect was also in the creation realm. She was in the same realm as the governor and deputy. Fulu school was one of the 6 sects of Taoism. There were countless powerhouses in the sect. There were nearly 10 creation realm powerhouses in the ancestral court's Baiyun Peak alone. The heads of the 7 peaks were all from Dongxian. The sect master was even in the 7th realm and had transcended. There were countless hidden powerhouses in the sect. Not to mention that this was only the ancestral court of Fulu school. Outside of the ancestral court, there were many branches that had the same origin as the ancestral court. Compared to the Great Zhou court, this kind of strength was slightly inferior. However, whether it was the current Great Zhou or the previous dynasty, they were not willing to easily offend these sections. After arriving at Qingxian Peak, the old woman sent a disciple to pass the message. After a while, Hanja ran out of a Taoist palace. Junior sister Qin followed behind him step by step. "Why are you here?" When he saw Li Mu, Hanja's face was filled with joy. He asked, "Have you finally thought it through and want to enter my Fulu school?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "I'm just here to send Han Yen and to see you." "Could it be that Lady Lu has entered the Fulu school?" Hanja said in surprise. "Which peak is she in? Which elder is she under?" Li Mu said, "Baiyun Peak, under Taoist Yuzenzi." "Yuzenzi." Hanja touched his chin and said doubtfully, "I've heard of the elders of Baiyun Peak. Where is the one called Yuzenzi?" Junior sister Qin opened her mouth in surprise and said, "Yuzenzi? Isn't the head of Baiyun Peak Marshal Granduncle Yuzenzi?" Hanja finally realized something. He looked at Li Mu and asked in shock, "Lady Lu has become Yuzenzi's disciple?" Li Mu nodded. Hanja's face was filled with disbelief. "Then isn't she our martial aunt?" "In theory, it is." Hanja was stunned for a while before he accepted this fact. Then he said, "So the rich woman they said you hooked up with is Lady Lu. In the end, you still chose Lady Lu." He sighed and said, "Back then, the three of us were the same. Now, Li Si has Miss Meow Meow, you have Lady Lu, but by my side." Li Mu looked at Junior Sister Qin and said, "Isn't there Junior Sister Qin by your side?" Junior Sister Qin's face turned red and she looked down at her feet. Speaking of this, Hanja was a little distressed. He said to Junior Sister Qin, "Senior brother Qin once said that he wanted me to supervise your cultivation. If you follow me like this every day, how can you have time to cultivate? Isn't this letting me down senior brother Qin's trust?" Junior Sister Qin glared at him angrily and gritted her teeth. "I'll go cultivate now." Looking at Junior Sister Qin's back, Li Mu shook his head helplessly. The old woman glanced at Hanja with a strange look on her face. After all, they were friends. Li Mu couldn't bear to see him die alone. He reminded, "What I mean is, how about Junior Sister Qin be your Dao companion? I really haven't thought about this." Hanja shook his head and said, "Senior brother Qin asked me to take care of her. How can I be her Dao companion? Besides, even if I'm willing, Junior Sister Qin might not be willing." Li Mu said, "How do you know if she's willing or not if you don't ask?" Hanja was taken aback for a moment before he asked, "Can I ask that directly?" "Why not? Wouldn't it be too abrupt to ask directly? Don't tell me you guys usually ask directly?" "What else?" Hanja's experience in love was blank. After hearing Li Mu's words, he seemed to understand something. He thought for a while and said, "Then I'll ask Senior Sister Zhang and see if she's willing." Li Mu changed his mind. Letting Hanja find a Dao companion was the greatest injustice to other people with normal EQ. Li Mu didn't plan to get involved in their affairs. In the next 2 days, he accompanied Lu Hanyan to play for 2 days with Hanja and Junior Sister Qin. On the morning of the 3rd day, he prepared to go down the mountain and return to the county capital. After all, he wasn't a disciple of the Fulu school. It wasn't good for him to stay here for long. There were other official matters at the Yamen. On Baiyun Peak, Lu Hanyan held Li Mu's hand and said, "When I'm not by your side, you're not allowed to fool around outside. I'll let Xiao Bai watch over you." Li Mu promised, "Don't worry. Except for you, I won't even take a second look at other flowers and plants." Lu Hanyan hugged him and said, "I don't want to leave you." Li Mu kissed her forehead gently and said, "I'll come to see you soon." Although Li Mu also hoped that the two of them could dual cultivate every night, she obviously didn't want to hide behind Li Mu forever. With a purine body, the guidance of a good teacher, and the cultivation resources of the Fulu school, she could go further on the path of cultivation in the future. After bidding farewell to the reluctant Lu Hanyan, Li Mu rode the flying boat and watched her and Wan Wan standing on Baiyun Peak from afar. They eventually disappeared into the clouds. Chapter 197. Prefectural City. Li Mu pushed open the door and entered. The courtyard was extremely empty. Without Lu Hanyan and Wan Wan, the house instantly felt a little less lively. When they were here, Li Mu did not feel so strongly. After they left, Li Mu realized how important it was to have a mistress in the house. "Benefactor." A white figure ran out from the inner courtyard. Li Mu bent down and touched Xiao Bai's head. He said, "You can turn back into your human form in the future." Considering Lu Hanyan's feelings, Xiao Bai appeared in her original form most of the time in front of Li Mu. In fact, Li Mu knew that she liked to turn into her human form, wear beautiful clothes and beautiful jewelry. Human beings were the most intelligent creatures. This was a tacit fact of all the races in this world. Therefore, no matter what kind of monster it was, the initial goal of cultivation was to turn into a human form. After Xiao Bai turned into her human form and put on her clothes, Li Mu said, "You can go and cultivate. I'll go and cook." Xiao Bai walked up and said, "I'll go with you. After I learn how to cook, I can cook for you myself." From the beginning, Xiao Bai was very clear about her position. She was here to repay Li Mu's kindness. Washing clothes, cooking, warming the bed, and folding the quilt were all things she should do. Li Mu was actually not used to being served in all aspects. However, this habit of repaying kindness was rooted in the blood of the Heavenly Fox clan. Xiao Bai listened to him in everything except for these things. After a long time, Li Mu also let her be. In the evening, when Li Mu returned to his room, Xiao Bai had already warmed the quilt for him. When Li Mu walked into the room, she turned into her original form and folded the clothes and put them on the bed. She had just turned into her human form. Although her emotional intelligence was not as good as that of an adult human, she seemed to know that when she turned into her human form, she could not sleep with Li Mu. Sister Lu would be unhappy. However, as long as she turned into her original form, it would be fine even if she was touched and hugged by her benefactor. When Li Mu woke up in the morning, Xiao Bai had already gotten up. She put the hot water on Li Mu's bed and said, "Benefactor, you can come for breakfast after you wash up." More than half a year ago, when Li Mu saved her from the hunters, he would never have thought that this would happen. If Wan Wan was Lu Hanyan's maidservant, then Xiao Bai was his maidservant. She was his personal maidservant. She washed clothes, cooked, warmed the bed, and served him. As long as she could think of it, Li Mu didn't have to worry about it. After breakfast, Xiao Bai took the initiative to clean up the dishes while Li Mu went to the county yamen. It had been a long time since the incident in Yang County. Li Mu had already chosen the reward from the county yamen, but the reward promised by the imperial court had not arrived. In the beginning, in order to eliminate Xiaoyu, the people of the old faction had offered the highest reward of heaven-grade Fulu and heaven-grade elixirs. Later, Her Majesty the Empress personally issued a decree to exonerate Xiaoyu of her crimes. Naturally, the reward offered by the old faction was nullified. However, Li Mu had also played a big role in Xiaoyu's repentance. Moreover, without Li Mu's consent, the new faction had made him the ambassador of the Great Zhou's officialdom. They had promoted him everywhere in the 36 counties to attract the hearts of the people and gather the public opinion. No matter what, they had to pay the endorsement fee, right? This was only the incident in Yang County. After that, Li Mu fought with Chu Jiang of Gojoseon and was seriously injured. He saved tens of thousands of people in the North County and saved tens of thousands of lives. At the same time, he also prevented an extremely vicious incident from happening for the North County and the Imperial Court. He had made an unparalleled contribution. If Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's plan succeeded, it would definitely cause waves in the 36 counties and even shake the status of the current empress. With such a contribution, Li Mu was worried for the empress. What reward would she give him? On the way to the county yamen, Li Mu was thinking about these things. Suddenly, he turned around and looked behind him. Just now, he suddenly had a creepy feeling, as if he was being stared at by some ferocious beast. When he turned around, that feeling disappeared again. He raised his arm and saw the hair on his wrist standing on end. Li Mu shook his head and continued to walk forward. However, he did not go to the county yamen. Instead, he patrolled the streets. 15 minutes later, Li Mu patrolled to the city gate. He walked out of the county city, deviated from the official road, and walked into the wilderness. Another 15 minutes later, he was already in the mountains. There was no one around him. Li Mu suddenly stopped and turned around to look behind him. He said calmly, "Come out." The space in front of him fluctuated. A thin old man with 3 long swords on his back stood not far away. He looked at him with a strange gaze and asked, "How did you find out?" Li Mu actually did not notice it. It was just that his body instinctively sensed danger. He left the county city and came here just to confirm it. Now, it seemed that his senses were not wrong. Someone was indeed spying on him. Li Mu asked, "Who are you people?" The old man grinned and said, "The dead don't need to know so much." As soon as he finished speaking, the space behind the old man fluctuated strangely. 4 black-clothed figures appeared. These 4 people wore strange armor and had wooden expressions. They did not seem like humans to Li Mu. Instead, they were like beasts. Furthermore, they were beasts without emotions. A strange sound came from the old man's mouth, and the 4 black-clothed figures suddenly rushed towards Li Mu. The four of them were so fast that they even left afterimages where they stood. This speed had already surpassed that of ordinary cultivators with remarkable abilities. These four people did not seem to have any intelligence. Other than being fast, their attacks were very simple. However, from the momentum of their attacks, Li Mu could not take them head-on. He used the swordsman formula to move between the four people. His mind was spinning rapidly. At first, Li Mu thought that they were four flying corpses. However, he did not feel any corpse aura from their bodies. He had the memories of Thousand Illusions venerable and quickly figured out what these four people were. Puppets. Puppets and zombies were very similar, but they were fundamentally different. Zombies did not have souls and were dead. Puppets had souls and were sealed in their bodies. Zombies could instinctively attack, but puppets needed to be controlled by their masters. After zombies gained intelligence, they would also have human emotions and no fear. However, puppets were different. Although they had souls, they did not have their own consciousness. They were fearless and did not fear death. Among the 10 demonic sects, there was a sect called the Puppet Sect. They were good at refining all kinds of puppets. Outsiders liked to buy puppets from them and raise them as sacrificial soldiers. The thin old man in gray stood in the distance and said in surprise, "You're not old, but you know a lot." After special refinement, the bodies of these puppets were comparable to magic treasures. Bai's magic treasure was only a profound-ranked magic treasure and could hardly hurt them. The four puppets were comparable to cultivators with the remarkable power. With Li Mu's current strength, it would be difficult to defeat them. Moreover, there was an old man whose realm was unknown. He stood in the distance and watched covetously. Li Mu did not intend to expend too much of his dermic powers. Unless it was a last resort, he did not intend to use Madame Chu's dermic powers to use Dao techniques. He took out a Fulu. After activating it with his dermic powers, the Fulu turned into a small golden sword and slashed at the old man in gray. This puppet was controlled by the old man. If the controller died, the puppet would lose its ability to move. Li Mu had obtained this talisman from robbing the county government's treasure vault. Its power was roughly equivalent to a strike from a Destiny Realm expert and could kill enemies below the 5th realm. This was Li Mu's test of the old man's strength. High-level sword talisman. The old man did not expect that a small constable from the North County would have such a treasure. The sword talisman was very fast and very agile. He dodged a few times, but the small golden sword still chased after him. In the end, the old man gritted his teeth and formed a seal. When the small sword caught up, he hit his chest and spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood mist wrapped around the sword talisman and the light on the small golden sword dimmed quickly. Finally, it disappeared completely. The old man's face became extremely pale and his dermic powers were greatly weakened. He roared and formed a seal with his 2 hands. The 3 swords on his back suddenly flew out. They shone with spiritual light and attacked Li Mu. Li Mu had already figured out the old man's strength. At most, he was a remarkable power cultivator and had not reached the Destiny Realm. He calmly took out another sword talisman and activated the Fulu. Another small golden sword appeared in the air. With a few clangs, the old man's 3 flying swords dimmed and flew back. The old man's dermic powers weakened again. The old man was shocked. "You still have sword talismans." The small golden sword had already flown in front of him. The old man did not hesitate. He bit the tip of his tongue and spat out another mouthful of essence blood. The small golden sword was stained with blood. The golden light dimmed and it finally collapsed. As for the old man, after spitting out essence blood twice in a row, his dermic powers had weakened to the extreme. He simply sat on the ground and used all his strength to control the 4 puppets. The speed of the 4 puppets increased dramatically. With their strong bodies, if they caught Li Mu, they would probably tear him to pieces. The old man gritted his teeth. "I want to see how many more of your Earth-rank Fulu you have." Li Mu flipped his hand and a stack of Fulu appeared in his palm. He threw one out and a huge illusory hand suddenly appeared above his head. The huge hand pressed down on the 4 puppets and directly pressed them into the ground. Puff! blood gushed out of the old man's mouth as he looked at Li Mu in horror. He cursed angrily in his heart. Who said that the target this time was only a small bailiff with no background and the highest cultivation level was only at the immortal realm? The immortal realm was at the immortal realm, but this immortal realm was too rich and overbearing. He threw out one earth-rank Fulu after another. Even a core disciple of the Fulu school would not be so wasteful. Li Mu held another sword talisman in his hand. He looked at the old man and asked, "Who ordered you to come?" This was the first time Li Mu met the old man. Naturally, he would not offend him. This person wanted to kill him as soon as they met. There must be someone behind him. There was a mistake in the target's information. He had underestimated the opponent's strength. The old man did not want to continue fighting and retreated quickly. With a thought, Li Mu's bai sword flew out of his hand. Mrs. Chu's figure appeared and quickly chased after the old man. Chapter 198. Madame Chu's current cultivation had completely stabilized at the soul realm. The gray-robed elder might already be at the peak of the fourth realm, but under the consumption of Li Mu's 2 earth-rank Fulu, his blood essence was greatly damaged, and his magic power was less than 10%. Madame Chu was enough to deal with him. Li Mu put away the stack of Fulu in his hand. This was actually the reason why cultivators from other sects rarely provoked the disciples of the Fulu school. For hundreds and thousands of years, the Fulu school's research on Fulu had reached the peak. They knew how to use the Fulu to activate the power of heaven and earth, or seal the divine abilities of their elders in the Fulu, and use it to fight the enemy at the critical moment. This way, the enemy seemed to be facing the disciples of the Fulu school, but in fact, they were facing the experts of the Fulu school. If it weren't for the fact that the higher the level of the Fulu, the more precious the materials needed and the lower the success rate of the talisman, even if the Fulu school gathered the strength of the entire sect, they couldn't draw more than a few heaven-rank Fulu in a year. The position of the head of the 6 Dao sects wouldn't have been taken by Xuanzong. Madame Chu quickly returned, and the gray-robed elder was only left with his essence soul. The elder's essence soul was scattered, and he was extremely terrified. He couldn't help but say, "Spare me, my lord." Li Mu asked again, "Who asked you to kill me?" The elder hurriedly explained, "I only received a mission. I don't know who the mastermind is." Li Mu had always been in the North County. If he had offended anyone or any faction, the demon sect was one. After all, Master Chen Huan and Chu Jiang of Gojoseon had died directly or indirectly in his hands. However, only a few people knew about these 2 matters. If the demon sect wanted to settle the score, they would look for the county governor, deputy, and lieutenant. They wouldn't find Li Mu. Other than that, he had only offended the old party of the imperial court. The brother of the county magistrate of Yang County's wife, an assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, was a member of the old party. The incident in Yang County was caused by Li Mu, and because of Li Mu, the old party's plot failed. It was very likely that the old party would secretly send assassins to deal with Li Mu. If Xiao Chun were to ask, he would not be able to get any information out of this old man. Li Mu glanced at him and said to Madame Chu, "Search his soul." Madame Chu shook her head and said, "His skills are higher than mine. I can't search his soul." Li Mu, "Don't worry, I'll teach you." Under normal circumstances, soul searching was something that could only be done by cultivators searching mortals. High-level cultivators would search low-level cultivators. However, this was not absolute. It was possible to make an exception using some evil methods. Li Mu would never show mercy to those who wanted to kill him. He erased the old man's consciousness and taught Madame Chu the demon sect's soul-searching method from Master Thousand Illusion's memories. Madame Chu took a deep breath and sucked the old man's consciousness into her body. Madame Chu entered Bai. Li Mu glanced at the 4 puppets that could no longer move and put them into the flask world. Then, he walked in the direction of the county city. When he was about to reach the city gate, Madame Chu sent some information she obtained from the soul-searching to Li Mu through Bai. Such an image appeared in Li Mu's mind. It was the gray-robed old man's perspective. A black-robed figure stood in front of the old man and said in a hoarse voice, "This little bailiff from the North County made my master very unhappy. I'll give you half of what you want first. After the matter is done, I'll give you the other half." Li Mu could not see the face of the black figure clearly. He could only see that his back was a little hunched and his voice was older. It was impossible to know his identity from this information, but Madame Chu found out his background from the gray-robed old man's memories. The gray-robed old man came from the divine capital of the Middle County, where the Great Zhou's imperial court was located. It was obvious who ordered him to do this: the county government. Li Mu placed the 4 puppets in the courtyard. The 3 officials' expressions were unpleasant. For some reason, County Chief Lin, County Minister Chan, and County Lieutenant Shin were all in the county government today. County Chief Lin asked, "Did you find out who did this?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "These are just puppets without consciousness. The real assassin is dead. I didn't find out who ordered him to do this. I only know that he came from the divine capital and was ordered to assassinate me in the North County." The divine capital. County Minister Chen's face darkened. He said, "Have they become so daring?" County Lieutenant Shun said leisurely, "It seems that His Majesty's public opinion rose because of the incident in Yang County. Some people in the old party are very dissatisfied. They sent people to assassinate you from thousands of miles away. Fortunately, they underestimated you and did not send a Creation Realm assassin." After going to Mount Baiyun, Li Mu now had the golden armor talisman. Even if a Creation Realm expert came, they would only be sending their heads to him. However, although some people in the old party were dissatisfied with him, in the end, Li Mu was just a small constable. Those people would not be willing to waste more resources on him, so it was unlikely that they would send a Creation Realm expert. County Chief Lin said, "I will report this to His Majesty." Then, he took out a jade bottle from his sleeve and handed it to Li Mu. He said, "His Majesty's messenger has just arrived in the North County. There is a creation pill in this bottle. It is His Majesty's reward for you." Li Mu had seen the name creation pill several times in various ancient books. This pill was of the upper grade of the heaven class. It took the creation of heaven and earth and could bring the dead back to life. No matter how serious the injury was, whether it was the body, the soul, or the primordial spirit, as long as there was still a breath left, this pill could heal all injuries in the body and the primordial spirit. It was one of the top pills. Having this pill was equivalent to having a second life. If Li Mu had this pill back then, Xiao Bai's grandmother would not have left her. However, even though this pill had heaven-defying effects, the materials used to make this pill were extremely rare. Many of the treasures couldn't be found in the ancestral state. Some grew in the ghost region of Yudu, some grew in the country of demons, and some grew in the depths of the 4 seas. There were also some unique items that could only be found in other continents. It took a lot of effort and cost to gather all of them. Not only were the materials hard to gather, but the difficulty of making this pill was also very high. It was already very rare for the top alchemy masters of the Danding sect to succeed once in 10 attempts. Due to various reasons, the creation pill was very rare. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a priceless treasure. Li Mu had only heard of it in books. He had never seen it before. He eagerly opened the jade bottle. A refreshing medicinal fragrance overflowed from the bottle. Li Mu noticed that County Governor Lin and the other 2 involuntarily swallowed their saliva. Li Mu immediately put it into the flask heaven space. This creation pill was the most precious thing he had at the moment. Li Mu felt that it was a loss to let them take a whiff of the pill's fragrance. Her Majesty was indeed generous. She had rewarded him with a creation pill for the incident in Yang County. What he had done for the county city was 1,000 times more valuable than what he had done for Yang County. What would she reward him with? Li Mu thought about it and realized that with his knowledge, he could not imagine it at all. He looked at County Governor Lin, waiting for him to reveal the answer. County Governor Lin felt uncomfortable under his gaze. He asked, "Is there something on my face?" "No." "Then why are you staring at me?" Li Mu asked. "Didn't Her Majesty reward me for the incident in Chujiang of Gojoseon?" County Governor Lin was surprised. Didn't she already reward you with a creation pill? Li Mu was surprised. Isn't the creation pill due to Yang County's contribution? Yang County. County Governor Lin realized that Li Mu had made two great contributions in a short period of time. He explained, "This creation pill is Her Majesty's reward for saving tens of thousands of people in the county city. Her Majesty also has another reward for Yang County." Li Mu had thought that Her Majesty the Empress was shrewd enough to want to reward him with both merits. Now, it looked like he had been narrow-minded and had underestimated Her Majesty the Empress's breadth of mind. He asked expectantly, "What's the other reward? Heaven-grade Fulu or heaven-grade magic treasure?" "Neither." County Governor Lin shook his head. He looked at Li Mu and said, "Congratulations, Li Mu. You're going to be promoted." Promoted? Li Mu was stunned. He had been in the county government for 2 or 3 months and had been promoted from a small constable to a chief constable. In the county government, only 3 officials were above him. He said in disbelief, "Her Majesty wants me to be a county governor? In your dreams. You've never been to the academy and you want to be an official." County Governor Shen glanced at him and said, "Her Majesty wants you to go to Shindu and be the chief constable of the county government." Shindu was the county city of Zhong County and also the capital of the Great Zhou. The county government's jurisdiction was within Shindu. It was smaller than the county government in North County. The county government was in charge of 13 counties in North County. The county government was only in charge of matters within Shindu. In this way, Li Mu was not promoted. He was demoted. However, the rank of an official was different in the capital. The chief constable of the county government was not lower than the county magistrate of Yangqiu. The problem was that Li Mu did not want to go so far away. In the county government, he could visit Lu Hanyan once a month. If he went to Shindu, he might not even see her once in half a year. Furthermore, Shindu was the base of the old party. He was far away in North County and they dared to send assassins. If he went to Zhong County, wouldn't those people eat him alive? County Governor Lin seemed to see his worry. He said, "You're not worried about your safety. They only dare to use some tricks because you're far away in North County. When they're in front of Her Majesty, they don't dare to act rashly. They're afraid that Her Majesty will have something on them." Li Mu was not worried about his safety. Unless they sent a cultivator of the 6th realm, Li Mu would be able to kill one of them. The problem was that this was not in his plans for the future. Shindu was a place of trouble. Li Mu was unfamiliar with the place. Although there might be more opportunities and cultivation resources, there would be more danger. He did not want to be involved in the political struggle between the old party and the new party. Li Mu looked at County Governor Lin and asked, "Can I not go?" County Governor Lin sighed and said, "In life, there are many things that are beyond one's control. Whether you're willing or not, you can't change the fact that you're already Her Majesty's man. The old party has already noticed you. Even if you don't go to Shindu, trouble will follow." Chapter 199. Li Mu had already realized that life was out of one's control. As a constable, it was his duty to punish the evildoers, protect the people, and uphold justice. His position was against the dark forces. Even though he had no intention of getting involved, what he did went against the interests of the old party. Even if he was no longer a constable, he could not change this fact. County Chief Lin looked at Li Mu and asked, "Why? Do you regret it?" It was impossible for him to regret it. Li Mu said calmly, "There are things a man can do and things a man can't do. As an official of Great Zhou, it is my duty to get rid of evildoers for the people. What's there to regret?" County Chief Lin said, "You don't regret offending the old party?" Li Mu laughed coldly. "I'm not even afraid of offending the heavens and earth. What's a mere old party to me?" Even though Li Mu had not been in this world for long, he had been through a lot. He had killed the elders of the demon sect and tricked Chu Jiang Shaowang. He did not want to cause trouble, but he was not afraid of it. He just did not want to go to Shindu. Now that he thought about it, from the perspective of cultivation, going to Shindu was undoubtedly better than staying in the North County. He had already emptied the county government's treasury. The county government's treasury was tasteless. Moreover, the items in the Earth Pavilion would be of little use to his future cultivation. In comparison, he would definitely gain more benefits by sucking up to the Empress. After all, she was willing to give Li Mu the cultivation pill, which was so precious that even Dongxian cultivators coveted it. This meant two things. First, she was a rich woman. Second, she was very generous. No one knew better than Li Mu how good it was to be a generous and rich woman. Before he met Lu Hanyan, he ate plain porridge and pickled vegetables. After he met Lu Hanyan, there were at least 4 dishes and 1 soup on the table. He wore good silk clothes and lived in a big house. He never had to worry about money. If he could become the Empress's confidant, he would be able to save at least a few decades of struggle on the path of cultivation. Lu Hanyan already had a master who was at the peak of Dongxian. In this year, her cultivation speed would definitely increase rapidly. After a year, it was inevitable that she would surpass Li Mu, which made him feel even more pressure. Lu Hanyan didn't want to be Li Mu's caged bird and be protected by him all the time. Li Mu also didn't want to hide behind his woman all the time. Occasionally, being behind her was a couple's romance, but being behind her all the time meant that he was living off her. Moreover, although the purpose of the struggle between the new and old parties was for power, at least Her Majesty truly cared about the people and the public opinion. From the incident in Yang County, one could see the difference between the new and old parties. In order to obtain psychokinesis and gain the love and respect of the people, Li Mu also needed to stand on the side of the people. Speaking of which, he was indeed on the Empress side. After listing so many benefits, Li Mu finally realized that this was a rare opportunity for him. After carefully analyzing the pros and cons, Li Mu quickly made a decision. Not only did he have to stand on the Empress side, but he also had to work hard to become her confidant. First, it was to carry out justice in his heart. Second, it was to save a few decades of struggle. No one could resist the temptation of saving a few decades of struggle. As expected of someone who dares to curse the heavens and earth, County Governor Lin looked at Li Mu with gratification and said, "I will report the assassination attempt of the old party to Her Majesty. She will probably send someone to escort you to Shindu. Once you're there, those people won't dare to act rashly. Before that, you don't have to come to the county government anymore. Take care of the matters before you leave." Before leaving Bay County, Li Mu's first thing to do was naturally to go to Baiyun Mountain again and tell Lu Hanyan about this matter. Baiyun Mountain. After parting for 3 days, Lu Hanyan couldn't believe her eyes when she saw Li Mu again. She ran to Li Mu's side and said in shock, "Why are you here so soon?" Li Mu held her hand and said, "I missed you." Lu Hanyan looked at the people in the hall and blushed. She said softly, "Senior brothers and sisters are still here." The elders in the hall looked up at the sky at the same time. She pulled Li Mu to a corner. Although her face was full of joy, she still scolded, "You can't do this in the future. Both of us have to work hard to cultivate." Li Mu sighed. "Even if I want to come in the future, I won't be able to come often." Lu Hanyan immediately became nervous and asked, "Why?" Li Mu said, "I'm going to be transferred to Shindu soon." Lu Hanyan was stunned. She asked, "You're going to Shindu?" Li Mu nodded and said, "His Majesty wants me to be the constable of the government office." He then looked at Lu Hanyan and said, "If you don't want me to go, I won't go." Lu Hanyan asked, "Isn't that going against the imperial edict?" Li Mu hugged her and said, "For you, going against the imperial edict is nothing. At most, I won't be a constable anymore." Lu Hanyan smiled and then asked, "Do you want to go?" After careful consideration, Li Mu decided that going to Shindu was more beneficial than harmful for him. He sighed and said, "If I go to Shindu, I won't be able to come and see you often. It's okay. In this year, I'll be in seclusion with Master most of the time. Even if you come to Baiyun Mountain, you won't be able to see me." Lu Hanyan rested her head on his chest and said, "Wan Wan and I grew up in Shindu. We're actually more used to living there. When the time comes, we'll go directly to Chengdu to find you. Li Mu shook his head and said, the undercurrents in Chengdu are turbulent, and there are constant battles in the imperial court. It's not a happy occasion. Xuandu smiled and said, Amitba, I believe that with third brother's ability, you'll definitely be able to survive in Chengdu. After he said that, he looked at Xiao Yu and asked, the baleful aura in Miss Xiao Yu's body has been purified. What do you plan to do next? The young girl shook her head in a daze and said, I don't know either. I used to follow my father everywhere to beg. Xuandu said, although His Majesty has absolved you of your crimes, the old party won't let you off so easily. Once you appear in their sights, you'll be in danger. If you have nowhere to go, I have a place to recommend. Xiao Yu asked, what place? Xuandu said, in the northwest of Zhu continent. There's a place that's shrouded in an energy and ghost fog all year round. It's called Yudu, a country among ghosts. Countless spirits and ghosts live there. You'll feel more at ease there. Furthermore, the environment there is more beneficial for your cultivation. Li Mu wasn't unfamiliar with the name Yudu. The haunted house he and Lu Hanyan had opened in Yangqiu County was called Yudu. After Zhao Yong's death and Lin Wan's revenge, the place she went to was also Yudu. After careful consideration, Xiao Yu decided to listen to Xuandu and head to Yudu. Before she left, she knelt on the ground and kowtowed several times to Li Mu and Xuandu. She said, thank you, benefactor. Thank you, master. Xuandu put his palms together and said, I hope you can be kind to others in the future and don't harm the world. Xiao Yu stood up and nodded. Xiao Yu will remember. Actually, Li Mu had wanted to bring Xiao Yu with him. However, after the incident in Yang County, everyone thought that her soul had dispersed. If she appeared in Chengdu and attracted the attention of people with ulterior motives, she would attract huge trouble. Chengdu wasn't North County. There were countless strong practitioners there, and a fifth realm ghost had no right to protect herself. Even Chu Jiang of Gojoseon, who had successfully advanced to the sixth realm, wouldn't dare to be impudent in Chengdu, let alone her. Secondly, Li Mu and Lu Hanyan had promised that in this year, other than Xiao Bai, there wouldn't be any other woman, female ghost, female demon, or any other creature with female characteristics around him for a long time. Chapter 200. The Bay of Clearwater. Li Mu stood by the river with two female ghosts, one big and one small, standing respectfully behind him. Li Mu asked, she still hasn't come out of isolated cultivation? The big ghost shook her head. No. Li Mu sighed. If Suhi didn't come out soon, he probably wouldn't be able to see Suhi face to face. However, Suhi's enemy was in the capital. If she could escape the formation at the bottom of the Bay of Clearwater, she would definitely come to the capital. Li Mu only needed to wait for her in the capital. His only worry was that with Suhi's arrogant personality, she might take revenge by herself. Li Mu learned from County Captain Shun that Cui Ming was the prince consort and was at the 5th level. He would definitely be surrounded by experts. She wouldn't be able to take revenge by herself. Li Mu left behind a letter and told the two ghosts to personally hand it to Su He when she came out of isolated cultivation. When he returned to the county capital, Li Mu was almost done with the arrangements before leaving. Zhang Shan was in charge of the Yunyan Pavilion's business. Plus, to the current Li Mu and Lu Hanyan, these gold and silver items were just numbers. Don't worry about going to the capital. I'll be here. Zhang Shan patted his chest and promised. I'm still waiting for you to open the Yunyan Pavilion in the capital. I wonder what the Emperor's place looks like. Li Si knew more inside information than Zhang Shan. He patted Li Mu's shoulder and said, the capital is deep. Be careful. This time, Xiao Bai would be going with him to the capital. Although her cultivation was still low, the demonic aura on her body had been expelled by the demon transformation pill. In the capital, this meant that she had a master. Very few people would have other thoughts. Before the old cunning fox died, he passed Xiao Bai to him. Li Mu also promised her that he would take good care of Xiao Bai. After this period of interaction, Li Mu had already treated her, who was sensible and obedient, as a family. At night, he laid on the bed and stroked Xiao Bai's smooth fur. He asked, "Xiao Bai, what are your plans after taking revenge for your grandmother?" Xiao Bai's body stiffened and immediately said, "Benefactor, don't chase me away. I'll be obedient. I can never take human form and stay by your side." Li Mu gently stroked her and said, "I won't chase you away. No one will chase you away. You can take human form if you want. Sister Lu won't dislike it." Jealousy was a woman's nature. However, Lu Hanyan was not an unreasonable woman. She did not argue with Xiao Bai. On the other hand, Xiao Bai was so sensible that it made Li Mu's heart ache. When she had intimate contact with Li Mu, she would take the initiative to turn into a fox. Xiao Bai happily asked, "Really?" Li Mu nodded and said, "It's true." Then he felt a young girl's smooth body in his arms. Li Mu covered his eyes and said, "When I said you can take human form, I didn't mean any time, and definitely not now." People often use the term fox spirit to refer to women who were extremely attractive to men. After having a real fox spirit in his house, Li Mu realized the basis of this saying. Xiao Bai did not realize how attractive she was when she took human form. She was already so attractive that people could not take their eyes off of her even when she wore clothes, let alone when she was naked. Li Mu wrapped her in a blanket and went to the courtyard alone to calm down. He also thought about Xiao Bai's situation. He had to avenge Xiao Bai's grandmother and the entire clan. However, Li Mu only knew the appearance of that human cultivator. It was impossible to find him. The divine capital was thousands of miles away. The chances of her finding her enemy were very slim. Li Mu tried his best not to remind her of those sad memories. He had been teaching her cooking for the past 2 days until Commandery Officer Shin came personally. There were 3 women with him. Among the 3 women, one was about 30 years old. Her appearance was average, but she was not weak. Conservatively speaking, she was a 5th realm expert. The other 2 were younger, about 25 or 26 years old. They looked delicate and pretty, and their strength was in the divine power realm. Commandery Officer Shin introduced, "These 3 are Her Majesty's internal guards. They came to the North region to escort you to the divine capital." Due to the assassination attempt, Commandery Officer Lin was worried that Li Mu would be attacked by the old party on the way to the divine capital. Therefore, he reported this matter to the higher-ups. He did not expect that there would be people escorting Li Mu, and they were internal guards. The internal guards were the Empress' personal guards. They were not under the jurisdiction of the imperial court and only listened to the Empress. They were established only a year after the Empress ascended the throne. The Empress's internal guards were like the brocade guards, the Eastern and Western guards, that Li Mu was familiar with. They only listened to the Empress. Although they were established not long ago, they had a lot of power. They could bypass the 3 provinces and 6 ministries and directly exercise their authority. Although the current Empress was the ruler of the Great Zhou, the way she ascended the throne had been criticized by many. Until now, she had not completely controlled the imperial court. The imperial court was mostly controlled by the old party. The existence of the internal guards was mainly to restrict the old party. Of course, their reputation was not good among the old party. They were generally regarded as the Empress's lackeys. Among the 3 internal guards, the older woman looked at Li Mu and said in surprise, "He's so young." Commandery Officer Shin saluted her and said, "He's Li Mu. I'll leave this trip to the divine capital to you." The woman said, "We're just following orders. There's no need to be polite." Then, she looked at Li Mu and said, "When are we leaving?" Li Mu said, "Wait a moment." In the past 2 days, he had packed everything that needed to be packed. After some final tidying up, they could leave. 2 hours later, Li Mu boarded a luxurious flying boat under the escort of the 3 officers of the North County and the constables of the county government. He waved at them, and the flying boat soared into the sky and streaked across the horizon. The North County was thousands of miles away from the divine capital. Although the flying boat was fast, it would still take a few days to reach the divine capital. Even a creation realm cultivator would overdraw their magic power if they used a magic item for a long time. In the past few days, they were not constantly on the road. Often, after flying for a few hours, they would land in a city below to rest. At night, they would find an inn to stay for the night. In the morning, after having breakfast in a county town in the Jiangyin County, they set off again. Li Mu boarded the flying boat and sat down cross-legged. He held the spiritual jade in his hand and closed his eyes, beginning to cultivate his qi. A single man and a single woman in a boat. He always remembered his promise to Lu Hanyan. He tried his best not to look at the flowers and plants outside. 3 days had already passed. Yet Li Mu actually hadn't taken the initiative to speak a single word to them. The charming woman with a cultivation at the creation realm finally couldn't restrain herself and asked Li Mu, "Are you afraid that we'll eat you?" Li Mu opened his eyes and realized that the woman was talking to him. A question mark appeared on his face. The charming woman said, "If you don't speak, I will think that you are mute." Li Mu put away the spiritual jade and scratched his head. He asked, "Are we almost at the divine capital? There is still half a day." Seeing that Li Mu finally spoke, the woman glanced at him and looked at Xiao Bai in Li Mu's arms. She asked, "Is this your spirit pet?" Li Mu shook his head. "No." The woman said in surprise, "Is she your wife?" Li Mu shook his head again. "No." The woman glanced at Xiao Bai and reminded Li Mu, "The divine capital is chaotic. A transformed fox demon can be sold for a high price. If you care about her, keep an eye on her." Li Mu cupped his fists. "Thank you for the reminder." The woman asked, "You are Li Mu, right?" Li Mu nodded. The woman looked at him with admiration. "You have such courage at such a young age. Not bad. I hope that when you reach the divine capital, you will not let His Majesty down. You will not forget your original intention and be a good official. Don't be like your predecessor, the predecessor before that, the predecessor before that." Li Mu was confused. What happened to those people? The woman said, "One is dead, one is crippled, and one is blind." Li Mu was stunned for a moment and made a prompt decision. Turn around. Although Li Mu still wanted to go back to the north region, the flying boat still reached the divine capital on time. 10 miles away from the city wall, the woman controlled the boat to land. She said, "You are not allowed to fly within 10 miles of the divine capital. Walk in from here." From 10 miles away, Li Mu saw a black line on the endless plain. It gave him a strong sense of pressure. It was the city wall of the divine capital that was several hundred feet tall. The closer one got to the city wall, the more oppressive it felt. The towering city wall stood tall. When one stood below the city wall and looked up, one would feel a sense of inferiority. Xiao Bai in Li Mu's arms unconsciously lowered her head. The charming woman glanced at Li Mu and said, "Let's go." Through the deep city gate, what entered their eyes was an extremely wide street. It was more than 4 times wider than the North Region main street. The street was full of people and there were rows upon rows of shops on both sides. There was an endless stream of shouting. Standing in the middle of the street, Li Mu truly understood the weight of the 2 words, divine capital. The charming woman said, "Let's go. I'll send you to the government office. Our mission this time will be complete." After sending Li Mu to a government office, when Li Mu looked back, the 3 figures had disappeared. Li Mu looked up and walked up the stairs. 2 bailiffs stretched out their hands and asked, "Who are you?" Li Mu took out his appointment order. After the 2 read it, they looked at each other. When they looked at Li Mu again, pity appeared in their eyes. One of the bailiffs said, "So it's the new Constable Li. Come in, I'll take you to see the commandant." The Divine Capital Government Office had 3 officers. They were the Divine Capital Magistrate, the Divine Capital Minister, and the Divine Capital Commandant. The bailiffs in the government office were all managed by the Divine Capital Commandant. This person was also Li Mu's immediate superior. This person's temperament and way of doing things were closely related to whether Li Mu would have a good time in the government office in the future. The bailiff brought Li Mu to a side hall. He knocked on the door and walked in, saying, "Commandant, this is the new Constable Li of the government office." Li Mu stepped into the side hall and looked up. When he saw the man sitting in the hall, he opened his mouth and said in shock, "Sir Zhang." Zhang County magistrates opened his eyes wide and said in shock, "Li Mu, why is it you?" Chapter 201. In the side hall of the Yamen in Luoyang, Zhang County magistrates poured a cup of tea for Li Mu and asked in surprise, "Why are you in Luoyang?" Li Mu replied, "I was transferred here because of the Chu Jiang of Gojosian incident." He looked at Zhang County magistrates and asked, "Sir, how did you become a Shindu commandant? I remember that you were transferred to a county in Zhongjuan to be a county magistrate. It's a long story." Zhang County magistrate sighed and said, "Before I was appointed, the original Shindu commandant was removed from his position and sent to prison. I don't know why the imperial court sent me to replace him. The change from Yangqiu County magistrate to Shindu commandant was not much of a difference in terms of jurisdiction. It was even smaller. However, the Yamen was directly under the imperial court and its administrative level was equivalent to that of a county. Zhang County magistrates had been dormant in Yangqiu County for 10 years and finally achieved a 3-rank promotion today. Li Mu clasped his hands and said, "Congratulations, sir." "Congratulations?" "Congratulations, my ass." Zhang County magistrates drank the tea in his cup in one gulp and leaned back in his chair with a hopeless expression. He said, "It's not easy to be in this position. The imperial court changes several Shindu commandants every year. It's better to be in Yangqiu County. I don't want to follow in the footsteps of my predecessor." He looked at Li Mu and said sympathetically, "It's not easy for you to be in this position. Do you know what happened to your predecessor, your predecessor, your predecessor, and your predecessor?" Li Mu said, "Dead, blind, and crippled?" Zhang County magistrates was stunned. "How dare you come here if you know?" Li Mu sighed helplessly and asked, "I just found out. Sir, do you know the inside story?" Zhang County magistrates nodded and said, "I've only heard about it. The arrestor before the Yamen was beheaded by His Majesty because of corruption and disregard for human life. The arrestor before the previous arrestor only took office for 3 days before he broke both his legs and resigned. The previous arrestor suddenly lost his sight the day before he took office." Li Mu said in shock, "How did that happen?" Zhang County magistrate sighed and said, "The Yamen sounds impressive, but it's actually a coward. Nominally, it's in charge of everything in Luoyang, but it doesn't dare to manage 30% of the things that happen in Luoyang. The Yamen can't handle 30% of the things that happen in Luoyang. If they make a slight mistake, not only will they lose their position, they won't be able to keep it, their heads won't be able to keep it." If Li Mu had known that his predecessors all ended up like this, he wouldn't have come to this damned place even if he was beaten to death. Now, he had already boasted to Lu Hanyen and Wanwan that he would make a name for himself in Fairy's capital in a year's time and bring them to Fairy's capital in a grand manner. It was too late to run away now. Zhang County magistrates looked at Li Mu and said, "In short, you have to be careful when you work here. Don't cause any trouble." Li Mu shook his head and asked, "Sir, do I look like someone who would cause trouble?" Li Mu was a little depressed about the previous arrestor's fates. However, he had encountered more than just bad things in Luoyang this time. At the very least, his immediate superior was an old acquaintance. At the very least, his life in the Yamen would be much better and he wouldn't be bullied by others. Before Li Mu came here, he was still worried that he would be assigned to work under someone from the old party. Now he could rest assured. Li Mu carried Xiao Bai and walked out of the side hall. The arrestor from before came up and said, "Arrestor Li, I'll take you to your place." The Yamen was very big. As an arrestor, Li Mu had his own private residence in the Yamen in Luoyang. The arrestor led Li Mu through a few moon gates and brought him to a small courtyard. He said, "This is where you'll be staying. Your subordinates have already cleaned it up for you, Regardless of how the job of arrestor in the yamen was, at least the treatment was much better than in the county yamen. Although there was only one room and the courtyard was very narrow, at least they didn't have to squeeze with many people. It was enough for Li Mu and Xiao Bai. This time, he came to Luoyang with a lot of banknotes. But it was obviously more convenient and safer to live in the yamen than outside. When he had a firm foothold in Luoyang, he would buy a house in the city and wait for Lu Hanyan and Wan Wan to come. The arrestor helped Li Mu put the bundle into the room and gave him the key. He said, "The bedding on the bed is old. If you don't like it, I'll throw it away for you. You can go to the tailor shop on the street and buy a new one." Li Mu wasn't used to using things used by strangers. He said, "Then throw it away." The arrestor carried the bedding and ran out quickly. After a while, he came back huffing and puffing. He asked, "Arrestor Li, do you have any other orders?" This arrestor was quite perceptive. From his accent, Li Mu guessed that he was born and raised in Luoyang. He had just arrived in Luoyang and wasn't familiar with everything. He needed someone who was familiar with this place. Li Mu looked at him and asked, "What's your name?" The arrestor said, "I'm Wang Wu." Li Mu continued to ask, "Wang Wu, how long have you been in the yamen?" Wang Wu smiled and said, "I grew up in Luoyang. 5 years ago, I replaced my father and came to the yamen." Li Mu said, "Then you should be very familiar with Luoyang." Wang Wu said embarrassedly, "I'm not bragging, but in Luoyang, I can find any place you want even if I close my eyes." Chapter 202. In the tailor shop, a young worker put the bedding Li Mu had chosen into a special cloth bag and said, "It's 1 tael and 6 coins. Wang Wu said, "We're old friends. Let's make it cheaper." The fat innkeeper smiled and said, "This is the new cotton this year." This guest also chose the best satin. "For the sake of the constable, I'll give you 1 tael and 5 coins. What do you think?" There would be many places where Wang Wu could be of use in the future. Li Mu tossed him an ingot of silver and said, "Keep the rest. Put it in the yamen and buy some wine for your brothers." Wang Wu took the silver and weighed it in his hand. It was at least 2 taels. The remaining money was equivalent to 2 months of his salary. Delighted, he said, "Thank you, boss." Seeing Wang Wu haggling with the innkeeper, Li Mu walked to the tailor shop and looked at the bustling crowd on the street. The salary of the constables in Luoyang capital was much higher than in Yangqiu County and the county capital. However, the cost of living in Luoyang capital was higher. With their meager salary, their lives must be tight. The cultivators in the yamen had other subsidies from the imperial court. Ordinary people like Wang Wu could only live on their salary. Although there were many cultivators in both the county and the city yamen, most of them were ordinary constables. Soon, Wang Wu came out with the bag containing the bedding. Li Mu was about to buy something else when he heard a woman's panicked voice. You pervert." Li Mu turned around and saw a woman covering her chest with her hands, looking at an old man with shame and anger. The old man put his hand on his face and smelled it. His wrinkled face showed a trace of lust. He asked, "You bumped into me by accident and now you're slandering me. Is there any law in Luoyang?" The woman looked at the old man's arrogant face and felt fear. She wanted to leave. However, the old man reached out and blocked her way. He said, "You bumped into me and now you want to leave?" Fear appeared on the woman's face. She said in a trembling voice, What do you want to do?" The old man clutched his chest and said, "You've hurt me. Either you compensate me or you come with me to the yamen." The woman said anxiously, "You were the one who molested me just now. Everyone, please be reasonable. I didn't bump into him." On the street, the few people who had stopped to watch shifted their gazes away. "Did you see that?" The old man looked at her mockingly and said, "You still want to slander me? This old man has lived for 52 years. What have I not seen? How could I take advantage of you?" "I saw it. You were the one who took advantage of this lady. You deliberately touched her chest with your hand." A simple and honest man stood out from the crowd and pointed at the old man. The old man's expression darkened as he said, "Who do you think you are?" One of the officers from the Ministry of Justice was stunned when he heard Li Mu's words. He could not help but laugh. "If you didn't mention it, I would have forgotten that there's a fairies' capital." The words fairies' capital sounded domineering, but it was only because of the two words fairies' capital. The county magistrate of any one of the 19 counties in Zhongjuan had more freedom than an official of fairies' capital. Although fairies' capital was several times larger than an ordinary county, it was far smaller if the entire county was included. Moreover, fairies' capital was where the imperial city was located. The fairies' capital could not compare to any of the government offices in the 3 provinces, 6 ministries, 9 temples, and various way manors. It was fine if the officials of fairies' capital kept their heads low. However, if they did not open their eyes, they would meddle in everything. It was not unprecedented for 5 fairies' capital constables to be changed within a month. The officer looked at Li Mu and asked, "Constable of fairies' capital, I think one just died and 2 are disabled. Are you new here?" Wang Wu walked up and gave Li Mu a look. Then, he looked at the 2 officers and said with a smile, "Brothers, Constable Li is new here. He doesn't know the rules of fairies' capital. Take him away. Take him away." The officer looked at Wang Wu and said, "Since he doesn't know the rules, teach him well. Otherwise, he won't even know how he died." He waved his hand and said, "Take him away!" Clang! Li Mu raised his hand. Bai unsheathed the scabbard and placed it across the officer's neck. Li Mu looked at the woman, the burly man, and the old man whose face was covered in blood. He said, "You can leave, but you have to leave him behind." The old man's eyes widened as he watched this scene in disbelief. The woman and the burly man were also stunned. The onlookers were even more shocked. When had they ever seen a constable of fairies' capital going against someone from the Ministry of Justice? The officer from the Ministry of Justice could feel the coldness from Bai. His face darkened as he asked, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Li Mu said, "I saw this case first. The Ministry of Justice has to follow the rules of first come, first serve." "Fine." The officer from the Ministry of Justice gritted his teeth and removed the iron chain from the burly man. He said coldly, "I hope you can be as stubborn later." The 2 glared at Li Mu fiercely and strode away. Wang Wu looked at Li Mu and said in horror, "Constable Li, it's your first day here, and you've already offended someone from the Ministry of Justice. The most radical people from the old party are in the Ministry of Justice." Li Mu shrugged indifferently. The old party had already sent assassins to assassinate him. No matter what, he couldn't get along with them peacefully. If that was the case, what did it matter if he offended them again? Zhang Chun gently raised his hand. A gentle force lifted the 2 of them up. He said, "There's no need to be so polite. This is what I should do." At this moment, Li Mu sensed the familiar aura of telekinesis from the 2 of them and the surrounding people. It seemed that this was indeed the right path of cultivation. The atmosphere in the divine capital was foul. If he could continue to gain the trust and respect of the people, not only would he be able to complete the 7 spirits quickly, but his cultivation speed would also be on par with Lu Hanyan's on Mount Baiyun. After the commoners dispersed, the Yamen's constables, including Wang Wu and Deputy Constable Sun, still had faint flushes of excitement on their faces. They had been in the Yamen for so long. When had they ever felt so elated? When they thought of the scene where the people spoke in unison, their emotions, which had just calmed down, began to surge again. Zhang Chun looked at them and said, "Remember, when you're willing to stand behind the people are willing to stand behind you. The hearts of the people are the strongest force behind the Yamen." At this moment, Li Mu seemed to see the light of the right path in him. Although he was a coward, he had never disappointed anyone when it came to major matters. After the Yamen runners left, Li Mu thought for a moment and asked, "What if the Ministry of Justice pursues the matter?" Zhang Chun said disdainfully, "The Ministry of Justice has 1 minister, 1 assistant minister, 5 doctors, 5 minister counselors, and 10 managers. Who does he think he is? Do you think those officials in the Ministry of Justice have nothing better to do than stand up for a small, insignificant manager?" Only then did Li Mu understand why he was so different from his usual self. He was domineering and impassioned. It turned out that he had predicted that the Ministry of Justice would not stand up for a small manager. He was indeed the Zhang County magistrate that Li Mu knew. At this moment, Zhang Chun closed his eyes and suddenly opened them. He said in shock, "Where's my telekinesis? Where did all my telekinesis go?" Chapter 204. The officials of the Great Zhou were upholding justice and making decisions for the people. After gaining the trust of the people would naturally generate psychokinesis towards them. This was an advantage that Taoism and Buddhism did not have. It was also the foundation of a country that could firmly suppress these sections. The psychokinesis generated by the people had been completely absorbed by Li Mu. Li Mu looked embarrassed and said, "Next time, I'll definitely leave some for you?" Zhang Chun glared at Li Mu and said, "I've been busy for so long, and you're getting all the benefits?" Li Mu said, "I couldn't control it this time. Next time, I'll be more careful." "There's still a next time?" Zhang Chun waved his hand and said, "I don't want your psychokinesis. Don't cause trouble for me again. I can still handle it this time, but I can't be sure about the next time. I'll try my best." "I don't want you to try your best. I want you to promise me." Okay. I promise." Li Mu gave him a perfunctory promise. His promise to Lu Hanyan was a promise. But Li Mu could not guarantee Lord Zhang's promise. After all, he could promise not to cause trouble, but he could not guarantee that trouble would not cause him trouble. As a constable, it was his duty to seek justice for the people, punish evil, and uphold justice for the people. This could not be considered causing trouble at all. Zhang Chun thought for a moment and said, "No, you're new here. There are many things you don't understand. I still have to remind you of the people and forces in Fairy's capital that you must not provoke." Li Mu thought for a moment and asked, "The old party?" Zhang Chun asked, "Why do you think it's the old party?" Li Mu had heard about the old and new parties from Constable Zhao. He said, "The nobles led by the Shao royal family have always wanted the Empress to stay in the Shao family. They've been working hard to make the Empress lose the people's support." Zhang Chun shook his head and said, "It's not that simple whether the new party is black or white. I can't explain it clearly to you, but you'll see in the future. In short, no matter who is black or white, it's best not to provoke the people of these two parties, especially the former imperial family members and the current Empress's Zhou clan. Other than these two, the Yamen of the 3 provinces, 6 ministries, and 9 temples aren't people that we can afford to offend. There's another group that we can't afford to offend, and that's the 4 academies. More than half of the officials in the current royal court are from the academies. Offending the academies is equivalent to making an enemy of the entire royal court." As Li Mu listened, he finally understood that, as the arrestor of the Luoyang government, there were 2 people he could not afford to offend. He couldn't afford to provoke this and that. It was no wonder that the Divine Capital Magistrate and Divine Capital Deputy were nowhere to be seen. If nothing happened in the capital, they were useless here. If something happened in the capital, they would not be able to handle it. That was why they left a Divine Capital Commandant to take the blame. Li Mu had a clearer understanding of the situation in the Luoyang from Lord Zhang. The old party was just a general term. Among them, there were members of the Shao clan who wanted to regain the imperial power, senior officials who had made outstanding contributions, and some young officials who were more radical. They all felt that it was inappropriate for a woman to be the empress, but their methods were completely different. Some were conservative while others were radical. The conservative wanted to seize power peacefully, while the radical wanted to stir up conflicts in the Luoyang and the 36 counties. They wanted to destroy the foundation of the empress's rule by sowing discord among the people. As for the new party, it was the power of the officials in the royal court led by the Zhou clan. The Zhou clan was the empress's maternal family. When the empress ascended the throne, the Zhou clan helped a lot behind the scenes. After the empress ascended the throne, they became the most prestigious clan in the Great Zhou. They attracted many officials who wanted to curry favor with the empress and quickly strengthen their power in the royal court. The new party led by the Zhou clan not only supported the empress, but also wanted to pass the throne to the descendants of the Zhou clan after the empress abdicated. This was the most intense and irreconcilable conflict between the old party and the new party. Although Li Mu did not make a fuss about a woman becoming the empress, in the end, Wu Zetian still belonged to the Li clan. The current empress was only trying to seize power, but the Zhou clan wanted to steal the country. After knowing this, Li Mu felt some sympathy for the empress in the palace. Although she was the ruler of the Great Zhou, the power in the royal court was basically divided between the old and new parties. The old party opposed her, while the new party supported her. But in the end, they wanted to use her hand to steal the country from the Shao clan. Zhang Chun saw that Li Mu was a little distracted. He coughed heavily and asked, "Do you remember what I said just now?" Li Mu nodded. "I remember." Zhang Chun said, "Then tell me in Shindu, which people and powers can't be offended?" Li Mu repeated, "The 3 provinces, 6 departments, 9 temples, 4 academies, the imperial family, the Zhou clan. They can't be offended." Zhang Chun nodded and sighed in relief. But for some reason, the more Li Mu assured him, the more uneasy he felt. After the head of the Ministry of Justice left, the capital office remained calm and peaceful. Nothing happened. Li Mu was puzzled. With the old party's determination to hunt him down, they would definitely not let go of such an opportunity. The Ministry of Justice was considered the radical faction of the old party. If the assassination in the North County was really related to the old party, Li Mu would definitely be the target of the Ministry of Justice. Just based on the fact that he showed his weapon to the people of the Ministry of Justice, there were countless ways to make a fuss. However, the Ministry of Justice did not say anything. When he first came to Shindu, he wanted to use this as an opportunity to test the old party and at the same time find out the Empress's attitude. In the end, not only did the old party fail, but the Empress also failed. Li Mu thought about it carefully and guessed that the Empress was busy every day and would not know about such small matters. She might have forgotten that she had just transferred a small bailiff from the North County to the imperial capital. This was not a good thing for him, who wanted to ride on her coattails. He still needed to wait for an opportunity to make the Empress pay attention to him. Imperial Palace. In a certain dark palace, behind the curtain, a dignified voice said, "Those who carry the people's firewood should not be frozen to death in the wind and snow. Those who pave the way for justice should not be trapped in thorns." Is this what he said? The young female official stood in front of the curtain and said, "He just arrived in Shandu today. In less than an hour, he snatched this case from the Ministry of Justice. Many people saw it with their own eyes. Let's wait and see. When the time is right, we can lure him into the inner guard." The dignified voice paused and asked, "How is the investigation of the assassination in the North County?" The young female official lowered her head and did not speak. The Empress asked, "Have you found it?" The young female official said, "Yes." A gaze shot out from behind the curtain and swept across the young female official's face. After a while, a cold voice slowly said, "Tell them that if there is a next time, I will not show mercy." The young female official bowed and said, "Yes, Your Majesty." The voice behind the curtain was silent for a while and asked again, "That official is called Li Mu, right?" The female official lowered her hands and said, "Yes." The voice behind the curtain said, "He does not fear the heavens and the earth, nor does he fear power. I hope that he can hold the firewood for the people and open the path for justice. Pass down my orders." Shundu Yamen. In the side hall, 2 people were drinking tea. Zhang Chun brewed a cup of tea and asked, "How is the taste?" Although Li Mu did not know much about tea, he knew that when Sir Zhang was still the county magistrate of Yangqiu, he liked to drink tea. His tea would naturally not be ordinary. He said, "Good tea." There were 3 officers in Shendu Yamen, but only the commandant of Shendu was stationed here. This was because the magistrate of Shendu and the deputy of Shendu changed too frequently. Later on, other officers took up the role. These officers were usually busy with their own duties and did not want to come here. Only the commandant of Shendu was left in the yamen to handle the daily chores. If one ignored the words Shendu, the commandant of Shendu was actually just a county magistrate in other counties. He did not need to care about other things in the yamen. Chasing criminals, arresting robbers, solving cases, and other tiring tasks were usually done by the county magistrate. Yangqiu County was just a small county. There was no deputy or commandant. At that time, Zhang County magistrates had no one to share his duties with. Other than managing taxes, education, and the economy, he also had to manage public security. After being transferred to Shendu and not being a county magistrate, he had a lot more free time. When he was free, he would ask Li Mu to drink tea together. Li Mu drank tea while listening to his complaints. Shendu sounds good, but it's not as good as Yangqiu County. In Yangqiu County, I can do whatever I want, but in Shendu, I have to be humble. Not only do I have to act like a grandson, but the things in the divine capital are also extremely expensive. How dare they charge 10 copper coins for a bowl of ordinary noodles? I originally wanted to work for a few years and buy a house in the divine capital, but after doing some calculations, I realized that with my salary, after working for a few years, I can only afford a toilet. Li Mu expressed his sympathy for him. In a place like Shendu, where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold, even Lu Hanyan could not afford a house, let alone an officer with a fixed salary. It was not too difficult for cultivators to get their hands on gold and silver. However, the officials of Great Zhou were restricted by the rules of the imperial court. They could only give up on the idea of getting rich. Before Li Mu could finish his cup, Deputy Constable Sun suddenly ran in to report that someone from the palace had arrived. The 2 of them did not dare to delay and immediately walked out of the side hall. A figure stood in the yard of the yamen. It was the charming woman who had sent Li Mu to Shendu. The charming woman glanced at Li Mu and said, "Listen carefully to Her Majesty's verbal instructions." Zhang Chuanzai and Li Mu straightened their bodies and stood in the yard. Li Mu was puzzled as to what the Empress's decree was and whether it had anything to do with him. Then he heard the charming woman say, "Constable Li Mu of Shendu, for punishing evil, upholding justice for the people, and curbing evil in Shendu, shall be rewarded with a house and 8 maidservants." Li Mu was stunned. He thought that the Empress had not noticed him. He did not expect that in less than 2 hours after the incident, the Empress would give him a reward. Zhang Chuanzai was also stunned. Even Li Mu, the arrestor, had received such a generous reward. Not only was he given a house, but he was also given a maidservant. Wouldn't he be rewarded even more as the commandant, the real hero of this case? He held his breath and concentrated, afraid that he would miss a single word from the woman. However, after the charming woman finished talking about Li Mu, she did not say anything else. Zhang Chuanzai raised his head and asked in confusion, "What else?" The charming woman shook her head and said, "Nothing else." Chapter 205. Zhang Chun found it hard to accept. Why was there no one else? He was the commandant of divine capital. He was the one who upheld justice for the people. He was also the one who faced the pressure from the Ministry of Justice alone. Yet the Empress only rewarded Li Mu. She did not even mention him. Things should not be like this. Where was justice? Even if he did not want a house, 8 maidservants would do too. Li Mu was delighted to hear the charming woman's words. Of course, he was not happy about the 8 maidservants. He had only been in divine capital for a little more than 2 hours and he had already received such a reward. This meant that he had entered the Empress's sight. He was one step closer to hugging her thigh. This time, the reward was a house and maidservants. Next time, it might be cultivation resources. Li Mu cupped his hands and bowed. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Ordinary people had to kneel when they saw the emperor. Cultivators only respected heaven and earth, not the emperor. Then he said to the charming woman, "Sister, can I ask Her Majesty to take back those maidservants?" The charming woman glanced at him and asked, "Why? You don't want them?" If Lu Hanyan knew that Li Mu had 8 maidservants in Divine Capital while she was cultivating hard on Mount Baiyun, she would probably be jealous. During these days in Divine Capital, Li Mu only needed Xiao Bai by his side. Li Mu was embarrassed to say that his family was strict. He could only say, "My salary is meager. My family can't support so many people." The charming woman asked, "Do you want a house?" Li Mu immediately said, "Yes, of course. Without a house, where would Lu Hanyan and Wanwan stay in the future?" This reward solved a big problem for Li Mu. The charming woman nodded and said, "I'll return to the palace and report to Her Majesty." Li Mu sent her out of the government office. The charming woman suddenly stopped in her tracks and said in a low voice, "Be careful of the Zhou family." Li Mu was stunned. He was about to ask again when the charming woman walked away. "Zhou clan?" Li Mu mumbled. The Zhou family was the Empress's relative and was the most powerful family in the Divine Capital. The Zhou family and the officials who relied on the Zhou family for survival had been fighting with the old party for many years and had a firm control over the entire imperial court. She wouldn't remind Li Mu to be careful of the Zhou family for no reason. There must be a reason behind it. Logically speaking, Li Mu had offended the old party and was assassinated. Even if she wanted to remind Li Mu, it should be to remind him to be careful of the old party, not the Zhou family. Unless the assassination in Beijing was done by the Zhou family or the new party. Li Mu recalled the scene in the assassin's memory. The black-robed man who hired the old man to come to the North County to kill him called him, "My master." In other words, the black-robed man was the one who hired the assassin to kill Li Mu. At first, Li Mu thought that it was done by the old party. After all, Li Mu had caused them great losses. They had enough motive and reason to commit the crime. The charming woman's reminder caused Li Mu's thoughts to change slightly. What if the mastermind was from the Zhou family or the new party? After all, after that incident, Li Mu would be a staunch supporter of the Empress's party in everyone's eyes. If he was assassinated, no one would suspect the new party. Whether or not it was done by the old party, they would have to take the blame no matter what. At that time, the new party would use this as a pretext to deal a heavy blow to the old party. Li Mu hadn't thought of this before. After the charming woman's reminder, he faintly felt that this incident might be a plot by the new party. Wang Mu and Lord Zhang were right. The waters of the Divine Capital were unfathomable. When Li Mu returned to the courtyard, he saw that Lord Zhang was still standing in the same spot with a wooden expression. Seeing him like this, Li Mu actually felt quite embarrassed in his heart. After all, he was the one who had contributed the most in the entire case. Li Mu was the one who took the person back from the Ministry of Justice. As for how he would be sentenced, that was his business. In the end, he bore the greatest pressure but got nothing. The psychokinesis, the house, and the maids all belonged to Li Mu. If it was anyone else, they would feel unbalanced and narrow-minded. They would inevitably make things difficult for Li Mu in the future. Li Mu walked to his side and comforted him. "Lord, don't be discouraged. Next time, Her Majesty will definitely think of you." Zhang Chun turned around and said, "I want to be alone. Don't let me see you for 4 hours." The commandant wanted to be alone so that Li Mu could leave the yamen. He happened to see Wang Mu and a group of constables coming out. Everyone bowed to Li Mu. "Greetings, boss." Li Mu asked, "Where are you going?" Wang Mu smiled. "We're going out to eat." "Boss, do you want to join us?" "Let's go." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "It's my treat today. You can choose the place. I'll pay for it." "Boss is generous." Drifting Fragrance House. Drifting Fragrance House. It must be Drifting Fragrance House. The constables made a commotion. Deputy Constable's son's face darkened and he reprimanded. All of your salaries added together are not enough to eat at Drifting Fragrance House. The noodle shop at the end of the street, if you don't want to eat. Although everyone was clamoring for Drifting Fragrance House, they still chose the noodle shop at the end of the street. A bowl of noodles cost 10 coins, which was much more expensive than the ones in Beijing. However, the total cost of a dozen people was less than 1 coin. Li Mu did not insist on going to Drifting Fragrance House. It was not that he was reluctant to spend money, but compared to the atmosphere in the restaurant, the noodle shop on the street was less restrictive and could improve the distance between them. The reason why he treated everyone to a meal on his first day in the capital office was to get closer to the constables under him. There were dozens of constables in the North County. The actual jurisdiction of the divine capital was even smaller than that of Yangqiu County. The number of constables was about the same as the county government. There was 1 constable, 1 deputy constable, and 16 constables. Including Li Mu and Deputy Constable's son, there were 6 cultivators. All of them were in the divine realm. The other 10, like Wang Wu, grew up in the divine capital. They inherited their ancestral business and were ordinary people who had never cultivated before. After Deputy Constable's son sat down, he looked guilty. He cupped his hands at Li Mu and said, "I was disrespectful to Constable Li just now. I apologize to you here. I hope you don't mind." At first, he still held a grudge against the imperial court for sending a constable out of nowhere and taking his position. However, after seeing the scene with his own eyes, he had to admit that Li Mu was brave. If it were him, he would definitely pretend that he did not see it. The capital office and the Ministry of Justice were on completely different levels. Li Mu gently stroked Xiao Bai in his arms and said to Deputy Constable's son with a smile, "Let bygones be bygones." Constable's son picked up his bowl and said, "I'll use tea as wine to toast Constable Li." The other constables around also shouted, "Boss is a real man." When have we ever held our heads high in front of the people from the Ministry of Justice? When we beat up that old man, it was so satisfying. Even I wanted to do it. Because there were too many government offices in the divine capital, the capital office's presence was extremely weak. It was so weak that many people had forgotten that there was such a government office. In the past, when they encountered something, they would avoid it. They had never experienced the feeling of many people standing behind them and cheering for them. Although all of this was not because of them, as constables of the capital office, it did not prevent them from sharing this glory. "The noodles are here." The owner of the noodle shop smiled as he served a few bowls of noodles. Wang Wu picked up his chopsticks and asked curiously, "Why is there so much noodles today?" The owner of the noodle shop smiled and said, "I was at the capital office just now. When I saw the lords punishing that villain, I was very happy. Lords, please eat as much as you want. Today's noodles are free." The owner of the braised meat shop next door brought over a large pot of braised beef and said with a smile, "How can we just eat noodles without meat? There's still meat in the pot." "Lords, if you don't have enough, you can come and get more. Today's meat is free too." This street was very close to the capital office. Many people had entered the capital office to watch the commotion. The group of constables sitting here quickly attracted the attention of the surrounding vendors. "Lords, this is my shop's pastry candied fruit. You must try it. Lords, you can divide this basket of apples when you leave later. Waiter, quickly bring some jars of wine to the lords. Bring that 20-year-old newer Hong too." The constables looked at the table piled high with the things that the surrounding people had brought over. They looked at each other. Deputy Constable's son looked embarrassed and shook his head. "I'm ashamed. This is what the government office should do. In the eyes of the people, it has become a rare thing." Li Mu picked up his chopsticks and said, "Eat. When you do things in the future, remember to think of these people." What he saw was not only the things on the table, but also the thoughts of the people. He also saw the psychokinesis in their bodies. Those who made decisions for the people would be trusted by the people. The power of the people's faith was the fastest shortcut to cultivation. The constables lowered their heads and ate silently. No one spoke. Their expressions were thoughtful. Li Mu did not expect that after this incident, they would become direct officials who did not fear power. This was impossible. He just wanted them to feel this collective honor and plant a seed in their hearts. After eating the noodles, Li Mu insisted on paying, but no shop was willing to accept it. The noodle stall owner shook his head and said, "Sir, I really can't accept today's money. Otherwise, I'll be criticized behind my back." Li Mu's insistence was fruitless, so he did not insist. After thanking everyone, he carried Xiao Bai back to the government office. Before he left, the tavern owner even gave him a small jar of newer Hong. The 3 years of conflict between the old and new parties had stirred up the atmosphere in Luoyang. The people who suffered were the people at the bottom. This justice that was supposed to exist was so precious in their eyes. As the constable of the Luoyang government, he had to make some changes. For the sake of justice and for the sake of cultivation. After entering the spirit realm, even with the help of spiritual jades, his cultivation speed had slowed down. Until today, when he received the psychokinesis from the people of Luoyang, his originally obscure Dharma power showed signs of speeding up. He did not care about the new party or the old party. He only did what he should do as the constable of the Luoyang government. Pleading for the people, punishing the strong, upholding justice and justice. These were his duties. As long as he did his job well, he would be loved and respected by the people and condense the last soul. They had known each other for a few days, but the number of times that Li Mu had spoken to her could be counted with 2 hands. Until now, he only knew that she was the Empress's inner guard. He didn't know anything else. The charming woman said, "You can call me Mr. May." Li Mu smiled and said, "Thank you for escorting me all the way, Sister May." Mr. May glanced at him and said in surprise, "How come I didn't realize that you have such a sweet mouth?" The word sister had obviously closed the distance between them. Mr. May looked at him and asked, "Are you sure you don't want the maids that Her Majesty bestowed to you?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "No, I don't want them." Lord May said, "Have you thought it through? Those maidservants are all peerless beauties." Li Mu said, "Then I can't accept them." Mr. May said in surprise, "Don't tell me you don't like women?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "Beauty will distract me from cultivation. I appreciate Her Majesty's grace, Li Mu." Mr. May looked surprised and said, "You can resist the temptation of beauty at such a young age. Her Majesty is right about you." After meeting Lu Hanyan, Li Mu became immune to beauty. He only cared about Lu Hanyan's pure yin. He didn't have any thoughts about other women at all. Even if they were sent to him for free, he wouldn't want to waste his primordial yang. He thought for a moment and asked, "What did Sister May mean by asking me to be careful of the Zhou family yesterday?" This time, Mr. May didn't say anything more. Li Mu continued to ask, "The assassination in Beijing was ordered by the Zhou family and the new party, right?" Mr. May still didn't say anything. Her silence meant that she admitted it. After walking for a while, seeing that Li Mu didn't say anything, Mr. May thought for a moment and said, "Her Majesty has high hopes for you. As long as you are righteous, Her Majesty will protect you no matter what happens in Shendu. You are Her Majesty's man. No matter if it's the new party or the old party, they can't touch you." Li Mu was slightly surprised and asked, "Her Majesty has high hopes for me?" He was just a small constable. What high hopes could Her Majesty have for him? Mr. May nodded and said, "Whether it's what happened in Beijing or what you did when you first came to Shendu, Her Majesty sees you in a new light. The Great Zhou is full of internal and external troubles. Her Majesty hopes that you can become a pillar of support for the people and a pioneer of justice." Li Mu didn't expect Her Majesty to value him so much. Did this mean that he had already found a powerful backer? As long as Her Majesty was still in that position, no one would dare to touch Li Mu's position. This way, he wouldn't have any worries and could do things without worry. He clasped his hands and said, "Li Mu won't let Her Majesty down." In order to reassure Li Mu, Mr. May continued, "As long as you can stay true to yourself and be loyal to Her Majesty, I believe that it won't be long before you become Her Majesty's inner guard. At that time, you will have more power and endless cultivation resources." Inner guards were Her Majesty's personal guards. Becoming an inner guard would naturally gain Her Majesty's trust and gain more benefits. Li Mu thought for a moment and realized another problem. All the inner guards he saw were women. This made him worried. He asked, "To become an inner guard, do I need to cleanse my body?" The charming woman looked at him with a smile and said, "If you want to, it's not impossible." After getting an accurate answer from Mr. May, Li Mu was relieved. Inner guards had more power and could do more things. If he could make a contribution, he might have the chance to enter Her Majesty's treasury and choose a reward. He was looking forward to it. He thought that when he came to Luoyang, the government office's rewards would be better. He learned from Sir Zhang that the government office had a very low status in Luoyang. In the treasury, there were only some Shen-class Fulu, yellow-class pills, broken magic treasures, and low-class spiritual jades. He didn't expect the Luoyang government to be so poor. It wasn't even as rich as Li Mu. Fortunately, he had the support of the richest woman in Great Zhou. She was very generous. As long as she was satisfied, she wouldn't be stingy with pills like the Fate pill, let alone other things. After coming to this house in the North Court, Li Mu deeply felt her generosity. Although it was called a house, it was more like a mansion. With the price of land in Luoyang and the location of this house, Li Mu and Lu Hanyan probably couldn't buy a house like this even with all their wealth. Of course, in Luoyang, the houses in the North Court were almost all official residences. They couldn't be bought with money alone. There was a seal on the door of this house. The charming woman waved her hand and the old seal opened by itself. She looked at Li Mu and explained, "This used to be an official's residence. Later, something happened to the official, and the house was confiscated by the imperial court. No one has lived here for more than 10 years. The empress had only been on the throne for 3 years. More than 10 years ago should be something that happened during the old dynasty." Mr. May said, "What a coincidence. Your surname is also Li." The original owner of this house also had the surname Li. However, he didn't have a good ending. "I hope you won't follow in his footsteps." Li Mu looked up and saw that the plaque was still there. However, there was a lot of dust on it. The words House of Li were written on it. Mr. May stood in front of the house and said, "Okay, I'll go back to the palace first. If you don't want those maids, you'll have to clean this big house yourself." After seeing Mr. May off, Li Mu and Xiao Bai walked into the house. They let out a long sigh and said, "This will be our home from now on." For the whole day, Li Mu and Xiao Bai cleaned the house. This mansion had been abandoned for more than 10 years. The courtyard was already overgrown with weeds, and the house was also filled with dust. Li Mu asked Madame Chu to order Bai to get rid of the weeds while he formed a hand seal with both hands. Suddenly, a breeze blew in the courtyard, sweeping away the dust in every corner. Then, he used the rain-summoning technique to wash the entire mansion. Xiao Bai took a cloth and busied herself in the room. The house looked a little dirty, but it wasn't run down. The seal that the imperial court put here could protect the house from the wind and rain to the greatest extent. In the house, the furniture used in each room was also made of high-quality wood. It wouldn't rot even after 10 years. After being cleaned, it would look like new. This saved Li Mu the trouble of replacing it. He even kept the plaque outside. He and Xiao Bai worked until the evening. They didn't even have time to eat before they finally cleaned the house thoroughly. The house looked brand new from top to bottom. During the day, Li Mu went out to buy pots, bowls, ladles, basins, and other kitchen utensils. He also bought some rice, noodles, and vegetables. At night, he cooked a few dishes and took out the newer hong that the wine shop owner gave him. This was considered a celebration of moving in with Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai usually didn't drink much. Tonight, she drank a little for the first time. When she got into Li Mu's bed in a daze, she forgot to change back to her original form. In the morning, Li Mu opened his eyes and saw Xiao Bai lying on his chest, sleeping soundly. She usually woke up earlier than Li Mu. Perhaps it was because she drank yesterday, but she had been sleeping until now. Li Mu looked at her sleeping coquettishly. He didn't want to wake her up and was about to quietly get out of bed when her eyelashes fluttered, and she slowly opened her eyes. She looked at Li Mu, then lowered her head to look at herself. She hurriedly said, "I'm sorry, benefactor. I forgot to change back last night." Li Mu said, Okay. If you don't want to change back, you don't have to." Xiao Bai was stunned and asked, "Can I sleep with benefactor like this?" Li Mu said, "There are so many rooms here. You can sleep in any one of them. When we go out later, I'll buy you a set of bedding." Xiao Bai lowered her head and said, "I'd better change back tonight. This way, I can save money." "Father and uncle can't use this as an excuse to suppress them," the old voice said. "Even if we don't do it, the old party might not be able to resist it," the young man said in disdain. "Do you think they are as stupid as you? If they do it, won't they be giving us a chance?" The old man said respectfully, "Young master is wise." In another official's house, a young man knocked on the door of a certain study room and walked in. He said, "Father, have you heard? The constable who killed aunt and uncle's family has been transferred to Luoyang. He has been promoted to constable and is still living in the North Garden." Behind the desk, the middle-aged official lowered his head and read. His expression was calm, like he did not hear anything. The young man could not help but say, "There's a path to heaven, but he chose to barge into hell. I'll find someone to deal with him now." The middle-aged official closed the book and looked at him. He said calmly, "You disappoint me." The young man was stunned. "Why?" The middle-aged official said, "Go out. When you've thought it through, come and tell me yourself." The young man walked out unconvinced. Soon, he came back and said with his head lowered, "I've asked Mother. She said that if something happens to the constable, even if we didn't do it, the new party will frame us. They will take the opportunity to suppress us. What if the new party finds someone to assassinate him and frame us?" The middle-aged man looked at him and asked, "What do you think the internal guards do? What can be hidden from them in Luoyang?" The young man clenched his teeth. "Are we not going to avenge aunt?" "Of course." The middle-aged man stood up and said slowly, "But not this way. There are many ways to kill a person. Assassination is the lowest level. Only idiots would do that." He picked up a piece of paper on the table. There was a sentence written on it. "Those who carry the people's firewood should not be frozen to death in the wind and snow. Those who pave the way for justice should not be trapped in thorns." He twitched the corner of his mouth and showed a mocking smile. He said, "Those who carry the people's firewood should be frozen to death in the wind and snow. Those who pave the way for justice should be trapped in thorns." In this world, if he wants to carry the people's firewood and pave the way for justice, he must be prepared to die. Li Mu did not know that on his first day in Luoyang, he had caused such undercurrents in the city. He had just bought a stick of candied haws for Xiao Bai and patrolled the streets with her. He smiled and responded to every citizen who greeted him. After what happened the day before, at least on the half of the street near the entrance of the government office, everyone knew that he had taken the first step in the cultivation of psyche power. Chapter 208. Greetings, Constable. Constable, have a pear. Constable, would you like to take a break at my shop and have a cup of tea? Along the way, Li Mu was greeted warmly by the people along the street. There was even a pear seller who stuffed 2 pears into his hands without any explanation. Li Mu gave one to Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai took a bite and eagerly brought the pear to Li Mu's mouth. She said, "This pear is so sweet. Have a taste, benefactor." Li Mu took a bite of the pear. It was indeed as sweet and juicy as Xiao Bai had described. At the same time, he also sensed a weak psychokinesis from the people on the street. There was no psychokinesis until they were far away from the Yamen entrance. This was because the people here did not know Li Mu and did not see what happened on the street that day. However, it did not matter. For the sake of cultivation, Li Mu would let the people of Fairy's capital know his name sooner or later. By then, he would be able to absorb the psychokinesis no matter where he went. He and Xiao Bai walked to another street. After a few steps, the sound of hurried horse hooves came from behind. Giddy up! A few fast horses galloped across the street. The people on the street quickly dodged. A young lady could not dodge in time and tripped on the ground. Seeing that the leading horse was about to charge over, Li Mu's figure flashed and appeared in front of the young lady. He raised his head and looked coldly at the horse. The horse was startled and raised its front hooves high, almost throwing the man on the horse off. "You're courting death. How dare you block my way?" The young man on the horse was furious. He raised his hand and lashed the horse whip in his hand at Li Mu. Swoosh! The horse whip sliced through the air and made a whistling sound as it lashed at Li Mu's head. Xiao Bai snorted softly and reached out to grab the whip. With a gentle tug, the young man on the horse was pulled off the horse and fell to the ground. This scene left the commoners on the street dumbfounded. Although the imperial court forbade riding on horses on the streets, and violators would be punished with flogging and fine silver, these officials and nobles had never taken this prohibition seriously. They often rode their horses and went on a rampage on the streets. It was not uncommon for them to hit and injure people. These people had deep backgrounds. The Yamen didn't dare to do anything about riding horses on the streets. Even if they injured someone, they could easily settle it with money. And that was when they were in a good mood. If he was in a bad mood, he could simply scold someone and walk away after bumping into them. The person he bumped into would have no one to complain. These people were used to being arrogant, and the people of Luoyang were used to it as well. If they encountered them, they would stay far away to avoid provoking them. They had never seen anyone who dared to pull them down from their horses. The young man fell from his horse. Although he was not injured, he was still dizzy from the fall. The people behind him tightened their reins and stopped beside him. "What happened? Who's blocking the way? Are you all right?" They jumped off their horses and started talking at once. The young man got up from the ground and said with a dark face, "I'm fine." After that, he glared at Li Mu and Xiao Bai fiercely. He gritted his teeth and said, "Who are you? How dare you block our way?" "Constable of Luoyang." Li Mu walked in front of Xiao Bai and looked at them. He asked coldly, "Who allowed you to ride horses on the streets of Luoyang?" At first, the young man was worried that it was someone he couldn't afford to offend. Seeing that it was just a small constable, he was relieved. At the same time, he couldn't control his anger. He was actually pulled down from his horse by a nameless official on the streets of Luoyang. He was afraid that after today, this would become a joke among the people in the circle. He looked at Li Mu and asked coldly, "What do you want?" Li Mu pointed at the people riding horses on the streets and said, "You guys, come with me to the Yamen." The young man glanced at him and said indifferently, "Let's go." Although he didn't care about a small constable, he wasn't stupid enough to go against someone from the Yamen. It was a provocation to the imperial court. When they arrived at the Yamen, this person would know how laughable a small constable like him was. After this, he would understand that there were some people he couldn't stop. That was if there was a next time. When they heard the young man's words, they all got off their horses. They didn't resist and just looked at Li Mu mockingly. They followed behind the young man and walked straight to the Yamen. Li Mu knew that the sons of officials in Luoyang were arrogant, but he didn't expect them to be this arrogant. Aside from riding horses on the streets after being caught by Li Mu, they actually walked in front of him to the Yamen. Obviously, they knew that the Yamen wouldn't dare to do anything to them. The commoners on the street were equally shocked as they watched this scene. They had lived in the Luoyang for many years and had seen fights between factions, the ascension of empresses, the rise of commoners, and the fall of wealthy families. However, they had never seen a mere constable who dared to drag down the sons of officials. Although they were delighted to see this scene, Everyone knew in their hearts that the constable of the city government was finished. One of the commoners couldn't bear it anymore. He approached Li Mu and said, "Sir, you shouldn't care about these things. The man riding the horses is the son of the director of the Ministry of Rights. He works under the director of the Ministry of Rights and is also the minister of Luoyang." Li Mu saluted the commoner with his fists and said, "Thank you for the reminder." No wonder this man was so arrogant. The director of the Ministry of Rights was a lower fifth-rank official. It was 3 ranks higher than the commandant of Luoyang. In the Great Zhou dynasty there were 9 ranks. However, the first and second ranks were only nominal titles. Third rank was the highest an official could reach. The fifth-rank director of the Ministry of Rights was not a low rank. He was the third in command of the Ministry of Rights. However, although Li Mu didn't have a rank, he wasn't afraid at all. Mr. Mei had already told him clearly that as long as he was upright, the Empress would always support him. With these words, Li Mu had nothing to fear in Luoyang. According to the laws of the Great Zhou dynasty, riding horses on the streets and endangering the safety of the commoners was punishable by more than 20 beatings and 7 days in jail. Li Mu was following the law. A group of people walked down the street and quickly attracted the attention of the commoners. "What's going on today? Why aren't they riding horses? Where are they going? Why is Constable Li behind them? Are they going to the Yamen? Isn't that Zhu Tsong? His father is the director of the Ministry of Rights. Constable Li just offended the Ministry of Justice. Why is he offending the Ministry of Rights now? He's doomed." The director of the Ministry of Rights is also the Prime Minister of Luoyang. That's Zhu Tsong's father's subordinate. Constable Li shouldn't have offended him. Constable Li dares to offend anyone. He even dares to curse the heavens. Have you heard of Do Yi's injustice? That was written by him. He cursed the heavens, the earth, and the imperial court. But it's different this time. The Yamen of Luoyang. In the back of the Yamen, Zhang Chun had made himself a new cup of tea. He leaned back in his chair and hummed a tune as he sipped his tea leisurely. He calmed down and thought about it carefully. He suddenly felt that Li Mu was right. Although a 5-entry and 5-exit house was grand, it was too big. Cleaning it would be a big problem. If His Majesty rewarded him with a 5-entry and 5-exit house, wouldn't he have to hire some maids and servants to match the status of a 5-entry house? If he hired maids and servants, he would have to pay them a salary. That would be another huge expense. If he added the cost of buying new furniture and renovating the old house, he might even lose a year's salary. In that case, it was actually a good thing that His Majesty did not reward him. After thinking about it for a while, he felt much better. Although the Yamen was small, it gave him a sense of security. Although he was often stuck between various Yamen and was in a dilemma, as long as his subordinates did not cause him trouble, not many people would pay attention to him. It was quite relaxing. Halfway through his cup of tea, he raised his eyebrows. He keenly sensed that there was something unusual in the front of the Yamen.